cost the most last time,
What's
but now
this?
it's there, but it's not like it's.
Okay, it does go to Essex
Something
Street.
changed on this
Or at least they're
laptop.
showing the drawing.
For some reason, he's only got one HDMI port.
Okay, what are we doing?
Yeah.
Scenic roads. It's so funny, we have to have a team of
I think it's the
3
laptop.
people to get this thing to work.
Did we get these minutes?
Oh, I know.
Did we get these minutes before, or we're seeing them for the first time right now?
No, because we tested it.
Can you answer me one question?
I didn't-
Comes right up.
Do
It's
we
something
have
with
a
this
budget for
laptop.
this, and has the money been allocated?
So have you looked at them?
Town meeting, I believe.
Definitely, yeah, we need to upgrade this,
I think we approved the reconstruction. I don't know if the,
I'm pretty sure. But
we just try this setting. Nothing.
I have my computer in the car if that's all we need.
That's right. Hang on 1 second. It could be.
In the minutes?
Let me shut it down. Hang on.
I thought you rebooted already.
I did, but I didn't actually shut it down. Sometimes it makes a difference if there's something weird with the hardware.
Yeah, just reboot.
Just give me a second.
5 minutes.
Hello?
So I'm doing, I did a quick I did a reboot, but I didn't do a shutdown. And sometimes a shutdown makes all the difference on equipment.
Because once it goes on, you should start seeing the Windows logo and all that.
Windows logo on this side.
That's it.
But it's not outputting, that's fine.
This was 2 meetings ago,
Wait one more second here. Get back in.
because we're behind one set of minutes. So is this last meeting or
Full
the?
shutdown. That was the trick. Can you put your password back in, Patrick?
That way you're just gonna make sure that the event is.
So we're still missing the 24th.
Keep it handy.
It said, review and approve the meeting minutes of September 21.
That's probably actually a good plan.
And October 5.
In general, if, either if we have a second source of, from the town, Patrick, you know, of a laptop,
Yeah.
or,
So I don't see anything
another resource to plug in.
in these minutes that catch
And
my
just
eye.
on the network and
Yeah.
and all that. Right now, you just gotta go through, you did the meeting, you just have to go back through those steps. One, do that for a second.
Okay, thank you. All right, welcome to the Hamilton Planning Board meeting Tuesday, October 19th, 2021. We have a quorum, and go through the agenda. First off, is a public hearing to go through and change the term Board of Selectmen to Select Board in each and every applicable location within Hamilton zoning bylaw. A Scenic Road hearing for Chabaco Road in advance of construction or reconstruction of that road. And then the senior housing special permit hearing continued, and then any board business. So we'll do a roll call to make sure, for the record, we have everybody recorded as being here. So we'll start with Pat.
Yep, Pat Norton.
Corey.
Corey Beaulieu present.
Marnie Crouch present.
Bill Wheaton present. Jonathan Poor present.
Emil Dahlquist present.
And Rick Mitchell present. Okay, thank you. So, Patrick, do you want to introduce the hearing background to changing the Board of Selectmen to Select Board?
Yes, Rick, thank you. The selectmen have voted and felt like it was appropriate to change the term of selectmen to select board to be gender non-specific. Again, they have voted in support of that, as has the Finance Committee, I believe, last week as well. So they are recommending that other boards, and we're, I guess, the secondary board that needs to approve it, because we have in, I believe, 18 different locations of the Hamilton zoning bylaw references to the selectmen. Each of those would be changed with the passage of this bylaw. In that this is a zoning vote, it does have to be voted by the planning board. The results of the planning board vote then go to town meeting as basically a recommendation coming from this board. Then town meeting members vote on it. Since this is a zoning bylaw modification, it requires 2/3 approval of this board, and then 2/3 approval by town meeting. I have in your package, understanding that some folks probably haven't been part of town meeting before, I've given you a little bit of extra information. I've taken the first couple of pages of the town meeting warrant. Under the table of contents, you'll see 3-2, amendment to zoning bylaw, BOS name change. And then on the following page, you'll see the exact language that is written as part of the article that's being suggested. As Chairman Mitchell just mentioned a while ago, this is essentially a change in each and every instance of and reference to selectmen to change to select board.
Okay, any questions by the board? Any public comment?
No one has their hand raised.
Okay, so I will entertain a motion to change within the zoning regulations, the word Board of Selectmen to Select Board in each and every applicable location within the zoning bylaws.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor, we'll start with Emil.
Abel Dahlquist, aye.
Jonathan Poor, aye.
Bill Wheaton, aye.
Marnie?
Marty Crouch, aye.
Corey Beaulieu, aye.
Rick Mitchell, aye. Okay, unanimous. I wish all our discussions were so efficient. Okay, next is the Scenic Road hearing regarding the Chabaco Road. As it's a scenic local road, it falls under the purview of the planning board to have a public hearing to discuss the plans for reconstruction of that road. Patrick?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This roadway has been a roadway that has had a number of issues regarding its actual placement in certain locations, certainly regarding its condition, and regarding some areas where there were drainage issues and stability issues, given its immediacy next to some of the water bodies in the eastern part of the community. A set of plans have been prepared. I've emailed those to folks. I've sent them to board members. You have tonight a larger color set that might be helpful to you. Ken Mavro George is here as the professional engineer, but first I have invited DPW Tim Olson to speak just to introduce the project a little bit.
So we recognize Tim Olson, and we hopefully will connect with him.
Can everybody hear me?
We can.
All right, I'm here virtually. Yeah, thank you so much for having us tonight. As Patrick said, we have Ken Mavro George with Wood & Curran, our professional engineer and project designer on this call as well. So he's here to answer any really technical questions you have regarding the scenic roadway and our plans for the reconstruction. But you know, we've been through this. I think it's going on almost 2.5 years since the town of Hamilton voted over $1 million to have this road paved. And there's a significant permitting portion of this project. We've also had a unique situation when this project, even though it's in Hamilton, we are going through land that is owned by Manchester. So this is kind of like a joint town project. We've met with their selectmen, we've met with their planning board, we've met with their conservation commission. The next steps in Manchester is they plan to have the easement article at their next special town meeting, which is in this November. If we get approval, there's a portion of the roadway up by Gravelly Pond that we plan to bring about 200 to 300 feet landward away from their water source and in a new defined easement. And then the plan is to pave the entire roadway from Essex Street all the way to the town line, you know, after we move that piece of the roadway. We plan to make some other, you know, have some other safety precautions along the way with some signage, some crosswalks, some shoulder parking, all with the intention of making Chabaco Road, as it is public, we want to make it as safe as possible for not only residents of Hamilton, but more importantly, public safety response, mail carriers, school bus drivers. All those have had some issues responding and accessing that area when the roadway, that gravel portion of Chabaco, gets too rutted or too damaging in a way, not easy to pass. So That was the intention of this project. Like I said, we got full support from the town of Hamilton about 2 years ago to do this project, and we come before you with obviously being a scenic road. We come before you with the approval, hopefully. And I'll turn it over to Ken, and he can give you some more of the details and answer any questions, technical questions, et cetera.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
Does the board have any questions for Tim? And these would be technical.
Yes, I do. Is the town of Manchester planning at all to pave their portion of the road to 128 so that it would become a true through road? Or is the plan to repave a road that will essentially dead end with a gravel road?
So I've talked to Manchester about that, briefly discussed that with their DPW director as well. I'm not exactly sure what their intention is in the future or the near future. I know that they would, it's only probably about 600 feet of roadway. Their portion actually is fairly well kept just because of the drainage and the topography of the roadway. It allows it to drain better in that little area. Obviously, there's 600 feet of area to keep up compared to our close to 6,000 feet or whatever. Maybe not that much. Maybe it's 3,500 feet of gravel. So significantly less portion of roadway for them to keep up on. But I do think they have plans to do something out at their landfill, apparently. They do use that landfill with the residents. I think they do weekly drop-offs there. So there may be some intention on their part to continue to pave through and link up with us. I haven't got the confirmation on that to answer your question, but I know it's a small amount of roadway that there's going to be some more activity out there that might lead to that. So.
Other question?
Yes, my question is, have there been any studies or analysis of how much through traffic is on the road right now, and how much that would change if it was paved mostly the rest of the way through, and also what the actual speed of travel is now, kind of on average, and whether that would change at all if it became a little bit more of a throughway?
So to answer your question, I believe there was a traffic study done by the group, the development group, outside of this project. They did look at the roadway. I did meet with the butters a few days ago. I think on the 14th, I had a butters meeting. That was a question that they had, and how I answered it was, it's hard to really determine traffic and speed, and they asked about truck exclusion studies, things like that. It's hard to really determine that and gain that data and study the roadway without it actually performing the way we intended to perform. So what I did ask them was to bear with me when we design this project. We are keeping in mind pedestrian traffic, pedestrian safety, vehicle traffic, motor safety. But once this project is constructed, we've now established the control to then study the roadway. And, we did confirm that the speed limits are posted correctly per the state regulation. So we've done that. I don't know about traffic speeds. I don't think that our Hamilton Police Department has done any traffic speed studies out there. But it is correctly posted. But, it's hard to really do any design or data crunching or truck exclusion studies or speed traffic studies until the roadway is actually performing the way we intended to perform. Right now, it's a gravel, an existing pavement, but then there's a large portion of gravel. If we did the study now, it's actually not true of what we would have in the future. I come before you to ask, for the approval for that piece of roadway that we need to move in order for us to construct the project, and then we can go from there when it comes to looking at the road a little closer and analyzing it.
Understood, thank you. And
Thank you.
a secondary question would be, let's say you did the work and it was discovered that there was a significant increase in through traffic and a significant increase in speed. And naturally, as we all know that road is narrow and doesn't have sidewalks and has limited sight distances in many locations. So naturally, that could become an ongoing safety issue. Has there been any discussion of how you might manage or mitigate that safety issue should that become a problem?
So we are doing, and Ken can touch on this, we are doing several things in the design, like I mentioned before, but part of that is actually developing or opening up some of the corners, opening up some of the sight distance on the corners. The tight corners, there's a lot of vegetation, there may be some trees in the way, preventing drivers from looking and having enough, sight in front of them. We are looking to establish the roadway to be a consistent width all the way across. We have looked at possibly, striping the roadway to give the sense of lanes and, narrow, country road feel. So, the Hamilton PD is well aware of this project and have been, the engineer and myself have met with the fire department. We've gotten we met with the police department. Our fire department is well aware of what we plan to do out there. We have full support from them. They see this as a positive benefit for a variety of reasons. And I do know, like any other town road, that it's a public roadway. So there's a standard that I want to hold these public roads up to. And I want to make sure that we design accordingly, but also everywhere in town, wherever if I pave a new roadway, we do have, unfortunately, we do have some issues with speed. Even out on a paved roadway, there's issues with speed. So what we can do is we can sign appropriately. We can get, talk to the police and have it patrolled, either more regularly during, the new construction, afterwards. But more of anything, it's a public, I think the town needs to understand it's a public roadway that I've been assigned to make this a standard, safe public road. We put signs up, hopefully people read signs, but how that works is, it's not always the case. So, giving them some advanced warning signs that are not there right now. Like I said, we're looking at doing some crosswalks where the Tobacco Woods parking lot is, putting maybe even a center post for pedestrian safety, that we have we have other spots of town. So we're trying to make this, pave it. We do understand there may be some additional traffic. There may be some, now it's a paved road. There could be some speed issues, but that goes for any road in town. People have asked for some permanent speed bumps. Well, we don't have any speed bumps anywhere else in town. So it's, if I put one out there, then somebody in Highland Street's going to want a speed bump. And where, there is a design standard that we use for a public roadway, and that's what we plan to use out there. Obviously, we'll have to make maybe some modification, maybe some additional signage, maybe additional or a speed reduction, or a truck axle limit, something like that. But that will all come as we move forward with this road and see how it, like I said earlier, how it behaves.
As you may know, we're looking at a development project which would involve the first 1,500 feet of that road in from Essex Street. And this project involves the removal of about 15,000 cubic yards of ledge, blasted rock. There are estimates that would be 1,300, 1,200 18-wheel truckloads back and forth across this road. I'm guessing that the road standards that you're thinking of would not at all accommodate that kind of load. What would you, if this project were to go ahead, how would you try and stage your project after this project was done? Or am I misunderstanding how much roads of this caliber can take in terms of actual load and abuse?
So, for load restriction or requirements and obviously roadway design, like I said, I'll probably lean more on Ken of how we plan to, especially with the new reconstruction, that's a full new roadway. The rest of the road, we're just doing kind of a mill and an overlay. you know, a 2-inch mill overlay. So we're not reconstructing any other piece of the roadway besides the area that's gravel. So I'll let him talk about the actual thickness of the pavement and, you know, how it would react to truck traffic. You know, if that project does go through, you know, I have had discussions with the developer. You know, we would probably hold off on that period of roadway all the way down to where they plan to potentially put any type of access off Tobacco Road. You know, and we could probably, you know, work with them to limit the trucks going up that one direction and have them go back out on 22 and around that way. So I'm sure that could be discussions. My intention is to do the project, you know, but if we have to do it in phases or stages to accommodate any type of, anywhere, if we have to do that for any other reason, we can do that too.
Any other questions by the board? Okay, questions from the public?
Nancy has her hand up. Tim, you also mentioned Ken would want to speak?
Yeah, I think he had a small little presentation just to give you guys a heads up, you know, an idea of what, a little bit more in depth of what we plan to do besides just the design drawings that you have in front of you.
Sure, go ahead.
Maybe we'll let Nancy ask her question first.
Sure, can we go with Nancy and her question first, and then the presentation? Go ahead.
Hi, Nancy Peterson, 111 Tobacco Road. So I'm just absolutely mystified how we could plan a road knowing that, you know, we're almost surely going to have increased traffic, you know, increased speed and everything without having any idea what the impact of that would be. And obviously, once you put it in, you can't take it out. So I don't understand. How can we go ahead with this without knowing that information and the impact it would have on the neighborhood?
Okay,
So,
thanks,
is that-
Nancy.
Can I answer that, Ken? Or Rick, can I answer that?
Absolutely.
Like I said earlier, I've been given the instruction to pave the roadway. That's my direction from the town of Hamilton. We do so with the standards that we have available to us, design standards, safety measures. You know, the intention is obviously not to put a highway. You know, it's a country road. A lot of what we're doing is just repaving what's currently there. You know, and we're just shifting over a piece of the roadway that is, you know, in an area that is, it's damaging to a water quality or a water source. So a lot of what we're doing is what the town of Hamilton wanted me to do, and I'm doing so with the intentions for all. I do understand that there is an impact to the abutters. That's why I did have a few meetings with them. I did answer their questions. You know, as I said earlier, it's hard to analyze and study a roadway in the current condition. You're basically just speculating at this point of what would happen and what the traffic would be. You know, like I said, I was directed to pave the roadway. That's the intention I'm moving forward with. I think we have a very good design. We have a very good designer. It's taken a lot of time to put a lot of efforts and thoughts in with the design, obviously with dealing and listening to the abutters as much as we can. We're putting their concerns into this project as well. But we need to have the project built to be able to, you know, look at if there's any issues besides just the normal traffic and volume.
If we see like 10 times the traffic, would it be possible to, and you know, people clearly going faster as a pass through to the highway, would it be possible to put up signs designated that no pass through is allowed?
So what I did say to the group was that, you know, I'm not at liberty to make that decision, but what I did say was that there could be the potential of putting something up on Essex Street, trying to bring truck traffic to keep them on 22 as a preferred route. I've seen that in other towns. I'm not saying that's a 100% guarantee, but that's something that I did bring up to them to at least eliminate some of the any type of truck traffic. You're still going to get your cars. You're still going to get your recreational activity. You're still going to get your boats and trailers. You're going to get the UPS and FedEx deliveries. You're going to get DPW going up to the landfill, as you always do. You know, you probably will get some people that are coming through there that want to drive a nice scenic roadway to get to 128. But if I can maybe eliminate some of the business traffic, seems to be more of the concern with the abutters, the larger trucks. That's something that we may, you know, that we can look into.
I understand the concern about the trucks and all that. That project clearly came up after the meeting, the vote at town meeting, right? So, but if in fact, I mean, I do think there will be a lot more traffic going through, absolutely. Because right now it's impossible. You don't go through because, you know, it's way too difficult and you know, damages your car. But, you know, it's been done in other places in town, like on Sharon Road, is an example, from Highland to Asbury, where the cut through traffic there just got, you know, just not safe. So who would make that decision as to do that?
Well, for the Sharon Road, the decision that you're talking about was through the Board of Selectmen.
It was through the Board of Selectmen?
Select Board, yep.
And so
that was after we did a traffic study and a speed study, and they made the determination they actually made the determination, I don't know, it was way before my time that those signs, those time do not enter signs went up. But recently, over the last, I think 2 years now, I was at a year because of COVID. I think it was 2 years ago, they made the decision to shut one of the ends of the Sharon Road / Asbury intersection. We actually cut that and shut it down. And then we've now built it so it's actually more of like a dead end, so it's not a cut through anymore. But that was the select board that made those decisions based upon data and recommendations and things like that.
Okay, so I'm just envisioning you know, a lot of cars using that road as a throughway to the highway. I don't see why people wouldn't, you know, people in Essex, people in Hamilton, all over. I mean, this would clearly now be the easiest way to get to the highway. And, you know, GPS will indicate that to people. So we're going to get a lot more traffic. And, you know, I'm not confident that they're going to be going at slow speeds, because we already have that issue despite posted speeds on the road. And so that really worries me, you know, and it worries me for not just me on the road, but for all the people who walk on the road and all that. It's just, you know, very, very concerning. The two issues between the big trucks and the traffic on the road, those are entirely different issues in my mind.
Right.
Okay.
I hear you.
Thank you. I think we need to move on. I think we've discussed, Nancy, you've made your concerns clear. I think Tim's tried to answer that. So is there anybody else in the public that would like to speak?
Like John Cole?
John Cole?
3 people with their hand up.
Okay.
Am I there?
You are.
Okay, thanks. John Cole, 66 Tobacco. Nancy, I think, nailed a lot of it. The part that we keep hearing from Mr. Olson is, you know, the town told me to build this road, the town told me to build this road. And that's not, I don't think that's a real reason to say, we're just gonna go ahead and build this road regardless. The concern is that there is several large companies. There are companies that have, you know, large trucks that will take advantage of this access. And as Nancy points out, along with the GPS, that this road is going to have significant travel. And everybody knows that, it seems to know that in advance, except for Mr. Olson, who says, no, we're going to build the road first and see what happens. It seems that once the cat's out of the bag, and once you know, Mayor gets up at 6 o'clock in the morning or 5 o'clock in the morning when their battalion rolls out of Mayor Tree with 20 or 30 trucks, they're all going to be heading, depending on where they're deployed to, but they're going to be heading straight down this to get out to 128. Or over to Manchester, wherever they have to do their work, and Black Earth is going to be going the other way. We're going to have a lot of heavy truck traffic, and we're going to have a lot of passenger traffic because the GPSs are now going to start steering people down this. And why we can't be proactive and say, no, we have to deal with this now. We're going to build this thing ready for this, build in whatever those safety things are, make the road, they're tearing up a whole big chunk of the road. Put a little of those micro rotaries in it, or any of those kinds of things that's going to slow traffic down or make it undesirable. People don't go down there now because it's undesirable to drive down. We want to pave the road. We want to make it nice and smooth. Great, make it nice and smooth. I don't think anybody's fighting the fact that you're just retopping the road. It's that by eliminating the dirt, what happens is that we now are going to have a ton of traffic. It's not just that we're repaving the existing road. And that's where the change is. It's not going to be the same road. This is a very quiet country road with very few people who live on this street, and the traffic is going to quadruple, and there isn't anybody who doesn't know that, with the exception of Mr. Olson, who refuses to accept that. Thank you for listening.
Okay. Do we have anybody else that would like to speak in the public?
Yep. Eric Brooks.
Go ahead.
Excellent. Hi, everyone. Eric Brooks. I live at the 444 Tobacco Road part. Happens to be the dirt road part.
Can you just identify your name and address, please, for the record?
Yeah, I thought I did. It's Eric Brooks, 444 Tobacco Road.
Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. So there's a few of us who do live down on the dirt road part. And it is definitely important that for those of us who live there, that does get paved. Part of it is just health-wise, if there's an ambulance trying to get down that road to one of our houses, really important that gets paved. And I definitely understand the part of increased traffic. We don't want that to be seen. So I understand that. I guess one of the things that I remember at one of the meetings that we talked about was potential for doing temporary speed bumps. Speed bump that could be placed out during the high traffic part of the season and then removed. I wasn't sure if that's something that was still talked about in terms of all the precautions that could be done to make it safe driving down the road for everybody.
Okay, maybe Tim can address that.
Yeah, Eric, how you doing? Sorry I missed you last week. Yeah, you bring up, we have talked about the temporary speed bumps. That hasn't gone off the table. I just wanted to kind of respond back to Mr. Cole's comments. It's not that I don't think that there's going to be more traffic. I don't know what that traffic amount will be. You do say there's a lot more traffic going. There's a lot more, triple the traffic. I don't know what that is until we actually have a road to study. I'm looking at the data behind it. And that's what we designed for. That's what we try to use for safety measures and signage. And so I want that to be known that I'm not disregarding that there may be more traffic. I just don't know what that traffic amount will be. And like Mr. Brooks is saying, the intention here is to ultimately have the road paved for public safety response, the health of the community. My job here in town is to maintain these streets and maintain these public ways to a degree that it is safe for everybody to use. It is safe for pedestrians. It is safe for public safety response. And that road is a tremendous amount of stress and a tremendous amount of maintenance. And we could go out there for 2 days and repave or regrade, and then within a week, it's damaged again. So we've dealt with that, and I think the abutters up in that area know very well what they go through, even to get back to their homes. So to my, and I said this at the meeting on the 14th, it'll only take one time before something happens, and then that's on my conscience. We have the ability to pave this roadway and make these design changes if necessary in the future, as in adding a temporary speed bump here and there. But the overall goal is to pave this roadway and to make it safe for the families, the public safety, and everybody, the community of Hamilton, and for any user. And I just want that to be known. There is a lot that goes in on this, and one of those things, like Mr. Brooks said, is looking at temporary speed bumps. Mass DOT is using them on the highways right now. They call it rumble strips. It's just a deterrent to try to slow somebody down, but then that can be removed. That is not off the table. That's something we will take a look at and work with the public safety and Hamilton PD with in the future.
You have a question?
Yes, I do.
Christina?
Okay. One more.
I had a question, another question.
And so does Marnie.
Oh, sorry, what?
Oh, Bill, after you. I'll go after you.
Is this project purely being funded by Hamilton? Or is the road declared a state scenic road and the state is contributing money into this project?
So the majority of the funds are from Hamilton, but we are using some Chapter 90 state funds as well.
Okay.
My question involves the designation of this road as a scenic road. Are scenic roads afforded any protection that other roads are not? And specifically, I'm thinking limiting access to commercial vehicles using the road as a throughway to 128. I mean, that seems wholly inconsistent with a scenic road.
So I can tell you, I can answer that real quick. There's about 12 or 13 scenic roads in town, and all the large major collectors in town, Highland, Essex Street, Walnut, are all scenic roads.
Okay.
So the only protection a scenic road has, in a way, is coming before the planning board and discussing that with the reconstruction of a scenic road with the planning board. And other than that, some of the major roads in town are indeed scenic roads as well.
And I think we have a question from the public.
Christina, yep.
Hi, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, so I guess I'm looking forward to the next part of the presentation. My understanding of a scenic road hearing is talking about which trees will be taken down, how many exact locations. Is that part of the next presentation?
I believe Ken had that as part of his presentation, yes.
Okay, and so as a Manchester resident, I did want to point out, Tim, that you keep saying this is for that, you must do this, this is mandated, it's for the health of the community. But I do, as a Manchester resident, need to clarify that we purchased this land for the health and safety of our water. So there is a concern. When you increase this traffic, you are going to endanger and put the water supply at risk. And so every time that you say it only takes one accident, it only takes one ambulance not to make it down there, the same is true for the Gravelly Pond, right? It only takes one dump truck to fall over and go into Gravelly Pond, and our water supply is contaminated. So it goes both sides. So this is quite a balancing act. So the final, or I have two things, this traffic study. I would like to know how you would compare the post-traffic study if you didn't do a pre. So how are you going to measure the increase if you haven't done a current day study? What's one question. And then in the very first, one of the first presentations there's out there, and there's a picture of a clogged drain, and it says a clogged trench. My understanding that is actually the salamander crossing. It's not like a trench. So is there data? My understanding, when that was installed, there should have been data and studies. This was a state initiative, and this was supposed to be looked at for the rest of the community and the rest of the state, and how these salamander crossings were being, if they were working. So do you have that data? And then my final question is, which exact trees are being taken down? Because this is Manchester trees, correct?
They are the town of Manchester, correct.
Okay, and so has anyone from Manchester been invited to this meeting?
I believe there was notices that went out. Patrick, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes, notices have gone out to the town of Manchester.
Do you know who they were sent to?
It was sent to the planning department.
Okay.
Okay, and then can we go on to the other two questions?
Yeah, the other, real quick, Christina, the other, yes, you are correct. That is the Salamander Crossing. That is actually part of the project that we would like to redo. It is full of dirt. It's at the low spot of the gravel road, and it's just been not maintained, full of dirt. Not, our intention is to redo that when we pave it, replace that back in, and now with a paved roadway, we can keep a lot of the material and sediment out to allow that to work correctly. The idea is with the moving of the roadway, obviously what we have now is not in great condition with the gravel road so close to the shoulder of Gravelly Pond. With the erosion and sediment controls, we have none out there. There aren't any in existence, so the material just basically sediment goes into the water. By bringing the roadway upland, the intention is to pave the roadway, but also implement stormwater controls, drainage swales, as well as retention areas that will capture the water from the roadway, drain down into these retention areas, and then have the ground naturally filter it out before it gets into the water source. So we are making some stormwater improvements along the way to help protect your water source, or Manchester's water source, with this project. And hopefully Manchester sees that as a positive. And the road, or where the existing gravel road is, we plan to scarify that roadway and replace that road with all the native plantings and topsoil from where we plan to excavate the new roadway to try to reestablish the existing forest area in that area location. So bring all the native species across to where the present gravel roadway is. To help replenish that area.
Tim, I have one final, the initial presentation that I saw didn't call for gravel shoulders. And so could you explain to me how this new gravel shoulder would not, the idea is to move the gravel away from Gravelly Pond so the sediment doesn't run in. So is the shoulder necessary? Because to me, it just seems we're creating the same situation.
It's in key spots. It's not up near that location. It's down closer to the boat ramp, just to allow some additional parking. We had that as a concern from some of the abutters to try to increase some of the off-street, side shoulder parking because it does get busy. So not up where you're at. It's more down where the recreational area is near the boat ramp.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'd like to see if we can wrap this up because we have a pretty heavy agenda with some of other topics. So do we have any other, I'll certainly take one more question from the public, but.
Al has his hand up.
Okay.
There's a Q&A question as well.
Can we allow Ken to speak and give his presentation? Maybe some of the questions will be answered by his presentation.
Okay, and how long is that presentation?
I can do it in probably like 5 minutes.
Okay, can we take the question? Well, why don't we do the presentation first, and then if there are any questions, go ahead, Ken.
Can I be able to share my screen for a few minutes?
I think you can. Hold on one second.
All right. Let me know when you can see the screen.
We've got it.
All set? Okay, great. So thank you very much. Again, thanks for having me here and listening to Tim and I. Just going to run really quickly through kind of where we are with the project. We've talked a number of times with the butters. We've met with Manchester by the Sea, Town of Hamilton, various boards and commissions. So a lot of this is repeated information that we had presented last week. But again, if there's any questions, we'll try to answer them. And in our contact information, we can certainly provide it if there's additional questions. So Tim touched on these, so I don't need to go too deep into them, but ideally the project goals here, we're trying to improve the condition of the paved roadway surface. The existing road is in pretty poor shape. We're trying to improve safety for vehicles, removing potholes that damage cars, improving sight lines to, make cars to reduce the amount of potential for accidents, but all the while trying to maintain that country feel of this road, limit our impacts to the woods and native species as much as we possibly can. That is seen as we're trying to stay within the same footprint of the existing roadway. All the while we're again trying to reduce the runoff by the existing gravel road, which goes directly into gravelly pond. And then where we can improve some stormwater management. So for those on the call who haven't heard the presentation before, this is generally the extent of the project. It runs from Essex Street at Route 22 down to the town Manchester by the Sea property or town line. It's just under 11,000 linear feet of road, and of which about 7,300 feet is currently paved and in poor condition. That we are proposing, you see in the screen in orange, would be a mill and overlay, in essence, just grinding off the top 1.5 inches and repaving that surface. And we talked about this the last meeting, but we understand that there are some spots along that stretch that are in poor shape that may need to be reconstructed. Those would be performed on a case-by-case basis. And then the remainder of the road, which is in green, is about, just over 3,400, 3,500 linear feet, would be completely reconstructed. We did do some borings in this area, geotechnical borings, with a geotechnical engineering firm to design a pavement and roadway section. To answer the question earlier about whether or not the roadway section would be able to withstand increased truck traffic from a temporary construction project. The design is intended to be a typical town road. The remaining portion of it, because it is a mill and overlay, we aren't proposing to replace that. I guess it's up for debate as to what that road would be able to hold in the future, but I would imagine based on the condition of the road that it's seen quite a bit of traffic in the past. This is a portion that's been referenced a couple times here tonight, but it's a relocated roadway portion. So what you see on the screen in red is the existing condition, the existing location of Chabaco Road. The yellow is a 1964 right-of-way that was deeded to the town of Hamilton from the Manchester by the Sea for the relocation of the road. The area in green is what we are proposing roughly for the relocation of this road. The goal here is to move approximately 1,300 feet or 1,200 feet away from Gravelly Pond as far as we can, all the while trying to provide some stormwater management with roadside drainage ditches to try to improve the situation and remove it away from a surface water source. This stretch here along Beck Pond is not a public water supply. And I just want to pause here for a second. This presentation is slightly different than the presentation we had sent to the board initially. This is based on conversations we had in last week. We had a meeting with local abutters. So we had modified it slightly, not to change anything about the project, just to clarify some more information. This is one bit that we added in. Including that Beck Pond is not a public water supply, but that the properties around here are on their own wells, and naturally from their source from underground aquifers. So in this stretch, the paved surface of the road is in poor condition. But what we are trying to do in terms of improvements here are replacing 2 failed retaining walls along Beck Pond that are allowing the subgrade material from the road to just enter into the pond. We propose to install a new wooden guardrail along the entire length of Beck Pond that abuts Chabaco Road. So essentially from the right-hand side of where my cursor is now, at Villa Road to where Beck Pond and Chabaco Road meet up. So the project includes the removal of 2 degraded retaining walls. The upper right-hand corner is the wooden retaining wall, and the bottom right-hand corner image is the new concrete precast concrete retaining wall with a integrated wooden guardrail on top of it. A picture of what a similar looking guardrail would be is on the left-hand side. The existing retaining walls collectively are about 30 feet. They're each about 15 feet in length, and the proposed would be 20 foot and a 40 foot. And the reason why they've been extended a little bit beyond the existing wall is so that they can actually tie into the existing slope from the road down to the pond and have some stability and prevent washouts from wrapping around the pond, the retaining walls. So we've done a lot in terms of various meetings. We've gone to and received an order of conditions from Hamilton's Conservation Commission earlier this year. We met with the Board of Selectmen at Manchester by the Sea in March. We have our ENF, we have approval from MIPA back in March of 2021. Town of Hamilton and us are working to wrap up our bid documents and plans earlier this year, and we're continuing to plan for town meeting. So we had a approval from Hamilton, Mass for the Article 97, which I'll get into, which is required for the relocation of the road. And we received approval at the town meeting on May 1st. So the relocated road, this is of particular interest to the last commenter, but the existing gravel road, because it's located within conservation restriction area, in order to move that, we would need to go through what's known as the Article 97 process from the Massachusetts Constitution. And that allows the transfer of conservation restriction area between 2 towns. In this case, we're working again in Hamilton and Manchester by the Sea to get this approved at both town meetings, draft up the legislation, get it voted on at the state level prior to putting this out to construction. We touched on it. It was a 40-foot right-of-way that was deeded in 1964. It's currently a 40-foot right-of-way, and in the proposed condition, we're trying to maintain that as best we can. So this is just a closer look to what's going on and what we're proposing. As Tim mentioned, we're proposing to abandon what you see in green, essentially 31,000 feet, just under 3/4 of an acre, to be restored back to or scarified. The material will be removed and scarified to allow it to return to a natural state. Selective plantings and seeds would be added in there as well. The area in blue would be essentially deeded back to the town of Manchester by the Sea, which is nearly 45,000 square feet. So in essence, they would be getting, Manchester by the Sea would be gaining nearly an acre total of area in exchange for the relocation of the portion of the road away from Gravelly Pond. What you'll see on the side here in red is what would be the right-of-way, and the yellow is what would be considered temporary grading as a result of construction. So what are the next steps? Obviously, we're meeting tonight with the planning board. In a couple of weeks, we'll be talking, we'll be at the Manchester by the Sea annual town meeting, and hope to receive approval from their constituents to approve the Article 97 documents and the warrant on there up for vote. If that goes through, then we'll finalize the legislation in December of 2021 with an anticipated bid in January to February of 2022 and construction March through September. So with that, I will point out there's just a couple of pictures of the area. On the left-hand side, you can see this is that trench drain that was brought up about the salamander crossing. And in what you see, it's basically at the transition point between paved and unpaved. And that unpaved portion is just burying that trench drain. The lower portion is a selected area where you see really degraded pavement condition. And on the right-hand side, you see Beck Pond. This is an area where we would propose to put guardrail to protect vehicles from entering into the pond. I will note, because it is a scenic permit, scenic roadway permit that we're here seeking, is that we're not proposing to go beyond the existing footprint for the existing paved surface, essentially just milling and overlaying in the same footprint for nearly 7,500 feet. The remaining portion of the road, it does vary in size from 17 to 22 or more in width. And what we're trying to do is propose a roadway that is 20-foot paved section, so it's consistent. What we do see when we're out there walking the site is that as it's getting maintained as a gravel road, the material keeps getting pushed further and further to the sides, to the edges of the road. And on the edges of the road, that's where our wetland resources were delineated. So this is a means of trying to reduce the amount of sediment and gravel and contaminants that end up getting pushed into the side in current condition. We understand that it's important to maintain the character of the scenic roadways. And I think the plan we've had here tries to do that as best we can. I tried to keep it short. Sorry, I might have gone a little over the 5 minutes, but hopefully it cleared up some questions, and happy to try to answer any that are remaining.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions from the board?
Could I have a couple of questions? Thank you for your presentation, Ken. This is Patrick Reffett. Just a couple of questions / comments. The first being, I know that there has been and continues to be a certain amount of driver confusion at the intersection of Chabaco with Essex. That little island there with the telephone pole in it, or utility pole in it, people don't always know which side to be on. And I've seen it being misused in a number of instances. Is there any attention or markings that you intend to place there to try to eliminate some of that driver confusion?
That's a great question. Thanks for sending that along. We have looked at that. We do have a plan to revise that a little bit because this other project at 133 Essex is come into fruition or they're going through the process now. We are working with Tim and to determine where the limits of our work start and stop. I think in this area in particular, that might be something that could be addressed with that future project. But we do have, if by chance this project would take care of that intersection, we do have some suggestions to improve the situation.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. So that's a to be determined. Another question that maybe your aerial or some of the other graphics might be helpful on. Can you show us the areas where tree clearance is anticipated?
Sure. So as part of the project, we are trying to limit as much tree clearing as possible. I will point out with this is along Beck Pond. In this area, there's quite a few dead or dying trees that would likely have to come out in order to replace the retaining walls that you see on the screen. or to install a guardrail along this edge of the road. The intent is to salvage or to limit the clearing to the dead or dying vegetation. Now, in some areas, we've talked about improving driver safety, visibility, improving sightlines. If we head down towards the Chabaco Lake boat launch, there is a sharp corner here where there are a number of trees that really do, basically block adequate sight lines. So we are proposing to take out this tree right here in the corner. We understand that there's been some accidents in this area. There is a culvert that crosses the road, and as you can see right now, there's not a lot of the drain. It doesn't grade well to get to that culvert location, which results in water ponding at this corner, making it really icy in the winter condition. So we're removing this tree. There are, again, a couple of other trees noted on our plan set along this area. This would be the area of the expanded gravel shoulder. So we are trying to sort of use this level area essentially to provide some room for folks to pull off instead of parking on Chabaco Road. And then lastly, if we continue driving along, this is the relocated portion of Chabaco Road. So the gravel portion picks up right around here and continues down to the Manchester town line. The existing 1964 right-of-way, it can't really see it on here, but it essentially goes from this intersection to this intersection here. So if we were to draw a straight line, that's essentially where that 1964 right-of-way exists. The proposed road would be somewhere in here. So there will be some trees that are removed. They are not currently lining a roadway. Essentially, there's some smaller vegetation. There are a few larger trees in this stretch of the area of the road, but as we mentioned, the intent is to remove or scarify this gravel road section and restore this to a naturally wooded area to sort of offset the removal of some of the trees in this area. And then I believe there may be, again, similar to what we're doing elsewhere, is along this stretch of road, if there's a dead or dying tree, I believe there's a couple in this area that are of substantial size that are limiting view lines. And just from a safety perspective, we're trying to reduce the amount as much as possible.
Thank you, Ken. Just as a general comment, yeah, it's been my experience, the better that you make a roadway in terms of visibility, drivability, etc., the more likely people are to be a little more careless in how they drive there. So that being the case, and understanding there is a great deal of pedestrian activity and enjoyment on Chabaco Road, I think it's important to commit ourselves to asking our Hamilton Police Department to enforce the speed limits and the traffic and signage that will be placed as part of the roadway for the betterment of the motorists as well as certainly the pedestrians and the residents that live there. Thank you.
Could I add one thing to that, Patrick?
Please.
That is that in addition to safety, this is also a financial investment, in infrastructure, which, I support the reasons for the investment. But given the fact that you can't really do a traffic study to anticipate what the change is, but we kind of know there will be a change, is there a way to put in place some sort of mechanism of monitoring this, to monitor, how well your investment is holding up, whether it's degrading from additional traffic, whether there's, safety issues, instead of waiting for it to be, waiting for failure, So is there a mechanism that can be put in place to sort of monitor this a little bit more closely as you see the changes in behavior?
I mean, I can answer that. What we do in town is we have a pavement management program. We do go out there and periodically review and drive and monitor and evaluate the roadways. And we build into our pavement management program that we have in town. This road, it's on it because it's partial pavement, but there's only obviously a section of it. With this full project, this full paving, it would be a road that we would monitor and put in that program.
Thank you.
We do have traffic volume numbers that have been submitted to us as part of the traffic study for 133 Essex on Tobacco Road. So we do have information as to the existing level of traffic.
Okay, I'd like to move this to a conclusion, as we've had about an hour and 10 minutes of discussion on this. Any other key issues or questions? Okay, so Patrick, what is our role here? Is to take a vote to approve this plan as presented?
Yes.
Okay, so I'll entertain a motion to approve the plan as presented.
I second.
Say again?
I'll move to approve the plan as presented.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, roll call vote. Corey?
Corey Beaulieu, aye.
Marnie Crouch, aye.
Bill Wheaton, aye.
Jonathan Bohr, aye.
Emil Dahlquist, aye.
And Rick Mitchell, aye.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Now, on to the senior housing special permit public hearings continued for 133 Essex Street. So Patrick, I assume we have, Jill will be making a presentation, and also I understand we wanted to have some discussion about the process by which we move forward and consider various subjects.
Yes, thank you. Leaf over to number 3 in your package. Let me make just a few remarks. As per our last discussion, I know that we had talked about the need for some scheduling and an ability to allow everybody to know what was upcoming, so we could all focus on the right topics in a strategic way. We could focus ourselves, allow the public an understanding of what was coming along, and to work at the same time with the applicant and the availability of technical information that they were bringing forward. I have prepared a schedule that I've sent around to board members. I've reviewed that with the chair. I've reviewed that with the applicant. I've sent that out to everyone. As part of taking that schedule, and it's in our package, I think I have sent that to many of the folks on the list tonight, but in any event, Jonathan and Emil have done some suggested framework to our processing of handling the information for the special permit. As we've talked on a number of occasions, this is a complex project with a lot of information that needs to be provided a lot of information that needs to be processed by the board, a lot of information that the public has the right and ability to react and respond to. So Emil and Jonathan have prepared an overall concept document called Proposed Framework for Planning Board Review of 133 Essex. And let me allow Jonathan or Emil to discuss it a little bit if you'd like.
So basically, it was really to key off of what Patrick already prepared, but create, in a sense, a roadmap so that we can approach this methodically and also give the applicant and others looking at it time to anticipate when we're talking about things and time to anticipate when additional information is needed. And the basic idea was also to basically go through the bylaws, and a number of sections of the bylaws have already been satisfied and even voted on, and then other portions of the bylaw haven't been discussed yet. So the overarching goal was to really put the application that we've received to date through the lens of the rest of the bylaw and its general intent, and see where there is alignment and see where there is information needed, additional information needed, and see where there are concerns, and separate those concerns into minor details and technical sort of refinements that would likely be resolved in peer review and technical review that Patrick has already outlined, and then separate other categories of concerns into where there's more general concern. And the idea would be to go through that basically using the bylaws as our script, and it could either be done numerically, sequentially, or it could be done thematically. Doesn't really matter which way it goes, but we'd be using the bylaw as a checklist, and then trying to move through that quickly, so the goal is not to finalize findings, nor is it to take a vote. It's really just to pass the remainder of pass the project through the remainder of the bylaws that have not been discussed yet, and just take the pulse of how this thing fits, and check off the things that are easy to check off, and then lean into the things that are of concern, and use it as a guidepost or basically a roadmap for our technical review, which Patrick has outlined for us. So that's the overarching goal, and the idea also would be to track that discussion, not repeat anything, only focus on new information or new relationships between existing information. So if a bylaw is sort of repetitive, if a section of the bylaw is repetitive regarding a previously discussed portion of it, we'd move along and say that's been discussed under such and such a bylaw, and we just basically go along and check the boxes, and that's again our guidepost for the more in-depth technical review, and the idea would be this would be done fairly quickly. So that's sort of an outline of the concept. And Emil, is there anything I missed in that?
Well, what we found out in this, as Patrick said, this is a very complex project. There are a lot of pieces, a lot of variables, and one of the things we were trying to do is to understand the relationships between a lot of the pieces. And that we felt that by creating this and using the bylaws as a guide going through for quick analysis in step number 1, and then the detailed analysis in step number 2, that would allow us to look at the whole picture, a broad look at the project at the outset, to determine where the so-called problematic areas might be within this project, but always moving toward a final conclusion and the final findings at the end, where everything is based on the bylaws, the senior housing bylaws. So this hopefully might turn into, if there are other complicated projects, could be maybe the beginnings of a format or a procedure to tackle other projects similarly.
And obviously, it could be condensed for simpler projects, but I think it's a great way to look at a project because you're looking at it as an overview before you dive into the technical pieces, and the overview can inform the technical details.
As we have basically 3 weeks between now and the next meeting, we need to skip the first week of November due to the election being on our preferred night. How dare they? But our next meeting will be on the 9th of November. I will offer to work with you two gentlemen if you'd like, and we can chart out something that, starts to flesh out those elements of the zoning or the senior housing zoning bylaw in a way that allows us to depict that information of where we're at, what we've done, and when we anticipate those items to come to us if we know that.
I guess a question for the board would be, and maybe you're saying that would be fleshed out in that process, but I guess a question for the board would be, would this be better served sort of sequentially going through the bylaw or sort of thematically? And I think with a little more preparation, thematically might be more efficient because there's a lot of repetition in the bylaws in the categories of things between purpose and findings. But it could be done either way. But the goal is to really check the boxes.
In regards to that, I had some time this week, and I don't want to overwhelm the board, and I can pass this out. I certainly would welcome all sorts of comments on this, but what I did was I went through the bylaws sequentially, and I created a chart. So row 1 would be the bylaw. The second row was the documents or evidence submitted by the applicant. The third row was the documents or evidence submitted by, the Chabaco Trails and Watershed and/or the town of Hamilton. And then I had further rows for whether the information was completed, the bylaw was satisfied, or more information was needed. So I did that analysis with the information that we had at hand. And then I did another chart where I delineated both the purposes of the bylaw and the requisite findings that the planning board has to make. And in the second row, I listed the applicable bylaws. So if you have a purpose, then those purposes point to different bylaws for their implementation. And likewise, the findings are dependent on various provisions of the bylaws being satisfied. And also, there were obviously thematic issues that aren't specifically addressed in any particular bylaw, and they include some of the very technical aspects that Patrick, you listed, the blasting, the water usage, the removal of ledge, and that type of thing. So I did make copies for the board members, and I'm happy to pass them along for any kind of discussion at a future meeting. I don't know if anyone can comment intelligently with just looking at these things very quickly, but I was thinking about the agenda, but in anticipation of even thinking about that, I thought, what information do we have and what information do we need? And so I took every document that I had on hand and tried to plug it into the requisite spot for the applicable bylaw. And I'm not saying it's a perfect product, but it's a start. And I think it goes to what Jonathan was saying. We have to be able to track where we are with respect to individual bylaws. And then when we have all this information accumulated, we can then look at it and say, are the purposes satisfied? Can we make the findings? So I'll pass this around and anybody can study it at their leisure.
So, Patrick, given what Marnie just brought up, what would you, well, I guess board-wide, what does the board see as the next step if this is the approach we take, basically to use the bylaws as a lens for an overview,
I think that we need to review what we have from Marnie. I think she's put a lot of work into it. We need to check and see if we need more categories for board involvement. I think that we need probably another column to signify votes on the individual items. As you recall, we've discussed on a number of occasions, it's so much more useful to be able to vote on individual topics. Once you've consumed that information, you understand it, you elocute it, and then you can vote on it, and then you can set that aside, gain from that information, and then work with the remaining portions of the project. That's kind of the process that works the best, in my opinion, in consuming a larger project like this with a lot of information. So, we need to evaluate the chart, add what we think might need to be added. This is a terrific start. Thank you so much, Marnie, for the homework that you've put into it.
So I would suggest that we use this template with the topics that are listed in Patrick's list for the October 19th meeting. So that we can test how useful this is and where modifications might be needed.
Right, I mean, many minds are better than one. So this was my start. The fifth column, which I marked satisfied, we haven't, I think we've taken a vote on the base density. That's my recollection. Yeah. But I marked some of the elements as satisfied because there's clearly, I don't think any dispute that there's age restriction, the location is eligible, and those types of things, the permitted uses. So where you see an S, that's probably something that we could
skip.
Well, either skip or indicate that they're satisfied, vote
right.
to
Well,
indicate.
no, I think you've laid out a good roadmap of sort of what we have discussed, what we've decided, what we've accomplished, and where we need to go next. So in your, using your format here, inclusionary housing bylaw is certainly one of the key topics for tonight's discussion. And I'm looking at this, Patrick, you must be using about number 6 font. Number 1 on your October 19th timeline is purposes of senior housing bylaw. I'm not sure I know what that means. That's a pretty broad
Yeah, I think that's part of the language that we had listed out to satisfy the zoning language as part of the bylaw, and that's why we listed it, to make sure that we're addressing those purposes that are set up in the senior housing bylaw, just as a discussion/vote item individually. And there's several of them in the bylaw text.
So are you referring to section 8.2.1 purposes? The purposes of this section is?
Yes.
So
And-
we're almost going back to the beginning here.
Yeah. My thought process is that we didn't want to unaddress those kinds of things because we have heard comment about the project and whether or not it fits the purposes of that senior housing bylaw.
Yeah, I certainly, I get that, but as we've talked about this before, when this, in all of our bylaws, the purposes are generally aspirational, and I'm not trying to limit the discussion here, but then they become very subjective. So it's very hard to, have 7 people discuss this, and they're gonna have 7 different opinions.
And, Mr. Chairman, I would make the comment as well as that although we could certainly talk about the purposes, I think that given the nature of some of these purposes, say, for example, protect natural features and environmental values, those types of things, there will be evidence presented down the road that will be germane to a determination as to whether or not that purpose is being promoted.
So you really need to be considering those purposes in the context of a particular subject that you're discussing.
Right, and at the end of the work product that I performed, I did identify the bylaws that related to the purposes and also the bylaws related to the findings, but I also highlighted some general themes. And it almost seems to me that the purposes and the findings almost go hand in hand.
Right.
Because although we can talk about them, obviously, a lot of the determination is evidence-based, and we don't have that evidence yet.
Right. We would be talking about this in a vacuum. So my recommendation is that we follow what Marnie is proposing is, as we go through the elements of the proposal, is to determine at the time, does it meet the purposes, and certainly at the end, in considering the entire project, does it meet those purposes?
I'm fine with that.
Everybody okay with that? Gentleman on my right?
Yes.
Okay. Corey? All right, so then, site entrance intersection comparison. Now, is this a continuation of the 3D discussion that we had previously?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So, is this where we're going to ask Jill to
Yes.
enter into the discussion?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, just for the audience's purposes that may not have this in front of them, the next will be site entrance, intersection comparison, review grading, roadway and unit layout, and then inclusionary housing discussion. So, if Jill is available, then we can hopefully move on to the site entrance, intersection comparison.
So I most certainly am available. I did have, good evening, Jill Manny on behalf of Chabaco Hill Capital Partners, LLC. Sorry for my voice, I'm losing it. Here with me this evening is the entire development team, Larry, Julia, the civil engineer, Brent Cole, and myself. I'm sure also that the project owner is on the line, who is Country Squire Realty Inc. If I may, I can share my screen and just go through a couple of things with you, because there were a couple of points, because if you remember, I had to actually get off the line for a little bit for another opening of the public hearing. And there were a couple of matters I just wanted to solidify. I realize I'm going off track, but I think it's important. One of those issues was Mr. Wheaton had asked specifically about the trails. I just want to make it clear that the answer to your question is there's absolutely no trails that exist on Chabaco Road in terms of what a trail really means, that there is no legal entitlement to use it, that, all of this conjecture relative to public use being able to establish some sort of easement or prescriptive right is totally erroneous. You cannot establish that kind of right. The public has no means by which to do that. So I just want to put it out there. There are no trails on this site. It is not open to the public. And anything that was shown on a plan that was made and distributed was done so erroneously and was not done with the consent of the owner. Then relative now, if I can share my screen, then I can jump right into the actual presentation, if I may, Mr. Chairman. So again, I had thought we were going to discuss the purposes simply because it was brought up. But I do want to note, I really appreciate the fact that Ms. Crouch had developed some sort of a outline. I don't have the advantage of seeing that. It wasn't shown on any screen for the people in the audience or any participants, so I'm not 100% sure what that was, but I would strongly suggest that if you want to do those comparisons as well, I did provide a very, very detailed memo that goes through every single solitary element of your bylaw in response to it. So if you go there, I do provide you with that roadmap as well, but not in a chart format, but more in a narrative format. So I just offer that to you because it's a fairly detailed narrative. So with regard to our, I think, are we going to talk about the 3D rendering first before we talk about the affordable? Because I'm hoping that we're actually able to put to bed that inclusionary discussion because it's obviously pretty important to us. Notwithstanding, let's just go through the comparison. It's really upsetting because last time we did the comparison, I know that I was offline, but there was some comparison made to a street opening, which is ours, to driveways. You can't compare a street opening to a driveway and say that it's not harmonious with the area. It's irrational. You need to compare openings, right, to openings. So here are actual intersections in the vicinity of our intersection. So this is currently what you see when you approach Tobacco off of Essex Street. And here's what we're proposing. I mean, I'd venture to say that our intersection is a little bit nicer. It's smaller. There's no overhead wires because we're not permitted to do that. Here's another viewpoint. It's not like homes are not visible from intersections. They are. And here you see a vision of that. I just compare our intersection because, again, before you were seeing driveways, sometimes stone driveways, in comparison to a street opening. This is not a driveway. This is a street opening. Here is another approach, right? So approaching it from the other direction. Again, when you come down our street, we're going to be having street trees along the intersection of Chabaco. And when you come and approach the intersection coming down the street from the intersection of Chabaco with Essex, there's trees all along the way and you can't see anything, which is the other direction. So then here's the offering. That's just basically, I'm just showing you a comparison because I think it needed to be seen. Before there was some statement that we hadn't provided the proper comparison. I mean, but this was the 3D model. We weren't going to, this isn't a $500 million project. We weren't going to literally give you models of homes that we take a picture of and show you in a Zoom format. It's just not appropriate for this type of development. So this is what we did, was we actually spent a tremendous amount of money to actually have the tree line imputed on a plan and then do the grading elements. I know that Ransom at one point had said, okay, we're taking down hills and we're doing that. Of course we are. I mean, we all saw the entrance. We have to remove a very large stone face in order to get into the property. That's just part of it. There's absolutely nothing in the bylaw that prohibits us from grading the roadway, and we are doing that. So, I mean, basically, that was what I was going to do is just review that 3D rendering of the intersection to show you we are, in fact, harmonious with other intersections, in fact, provide a better one. We have no overhead wires, and it's a very well-done intersection. It's as small as we could get the roadway because you'd still need to be able to accommodate two-way traffic. And at this point, I don't know, Mr. Ruffett and Mr. Mitchell, if people on the board want to have a question about the comparisons. I'm not really sure where to take this particular type of discussion since it's aesthetics.
Yeah, and I think that's a good segue to try and segment the discussion so we have discrete elements. So, and this is a continuation of discussion, as you indicated, Jill, that we began last week. So, why don't we start with board comments? Corey, do you have any comments looking at this? And Jill, can you put back up the drawings that show the entranceway?
Most certainly.
Is there a way that you can enlarge that as well?
Of course.
My only real comment would be with regard to the age of the trees that are installed.
Can you, when you talk into the microphone?
I'll do my best. The age of the trees that are installed comparative to what's being rendered to what is in the area already. Obviously, you're not going to put a 70-year-old tree in place, but are we going to put a 6-month-old tree in place and wait 70 years for it to block that view line?
No, on the landscape plan, we do provide for the trees. You don't provide an age, you provide for caliper and height. So the trees that are being placed on the side, they are, I believe they're 12 to 14 foot trees. And then the deciduous, they're based on caliper, not on tree height. And that's all listed in the landscape plan. Well, we most certainly don't mock the existing tree canopy. We cannot. We cannot. I mean, those are, I don't know that they might be 70-year-old trees. Some of them are 60, 40 feet tall.
Sure, I'm also just making up years as I speak, for example. The question is really, though, that what you're mocking up in your rendering, is that relative to what will be installed at day one?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's about 1.5 to 2 years out, but it's pretty darn close, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, Marnie?
I do appreciate your landscape plan. It occurred to me that perhaps in lieu of stone walls that you show here, a split rail fencing might be something more in keeping with the really rural character of the road. It's something that you used at Canterbrook. I don't know if that would have perhaps less of a more suburban feel to it than this stone wall. But
no, we appreciate that comment. We absolutely are willing. We just put the stone wall up, but we can most certainly mirror or imitate that look of Canterbrook, which are those split rail fences and then that small sign, without a doubt. Absolutely.
Right, and it occurred to me as well that, some of the plantings could be less formal. I mean, certainly old-fashioned daylilies and daffodils are the kinds of things that you would see in a rural setting as opposed to the more suburban type of formal plantings. That might be a way of enabling the project to tie in just slightly better with the neighbors. Whether that is something that would be more satisfactory to them or not, I can't speak to that. But it would make the entranceway a little less formal and more in keeping with a country feel.
We can look at that.
I'm going to jump in just as a prerogative as chair and agree with Marnie. Either that, or whether it's a split rail or an actual stone wall, a dry stone wall, because as this is portrayed, it really sticks out, and this is not a shot at the designer, it sticks out like a sore thumb as being completely different than what the surrounding neighborhoods and the rest of the community actually looks like. This is something I would expect to see in Lexington or, whatever the landscape designer can do to kind of soften this and make it less, it's kind of stark. It kind of like stands out and says to me, you are in a different place.
I understand. We can soften the look and maybe take a little lesson from over at Canterbrook and redo the front and revise our landscape plan. That's not an issue for us.
Yeah. I think one of the things that just sort of grabs me, and again, is the monolith on the left-hand side.
Well, that's a little much, huh?
It looks like something from Space Odyssey. So I expected to start talking to me. So just, it's that kind of changes that I think would greatly.
You know what maybe we'll even try to do, Mr. Mitchell and Ms. Crouch, is you have that really pretty native stone wall that we have said that we'll try and help repair that's been knocked down in certain parts on Essex. Maybe, and that's your point, a dry wall. Maybe we could see if we can find out if we have any contractors that could make sort of that country wall and then, end it at some point and put it like a little split rail fence and then take the plantings and make them more, the daylilies, maybe some grasses, but there's a lot of, I think inkberry, I don't know what that is, but it looks to me to be a, evergreen bush of some sort, like a boxwood. We can take out boxwoods and put in something more in keeping with what the general surrounding is, something a little less, to your point, stark and a little warmer.
Yeah.
We can definitely make a stab at that. That's not a problem.
Yeah, just one last comment, and then I'll pass it on to the architects, who I'm sure will have much more detailed comments, is the deciduous trees. I'm just thinking the landscaping could help soften and make this feel more in keeping with the neighborhood as it is now. And again, I'm not a landscaper, but I'm looking at the 3 red, I don't know whether they're maples or whatever they are there, as if there could be a bunching of evergreens, sort of just soften that corner and actually hide the houses that are behind it, because they kind of like stick out as like they're right there when you drive in or drive by. So that's just a comment, and I'll pass it on to the more experienced and erudite members to my right. Bill?
I have a little more radical idea.
Should we be lying down?
Excuse me.
There are 2 houses right at the entrance that almost border right upon Tobacco Road. They're units.
You gotta speak up, Bill.
35 and 36, I guess, 34.
33 and 34, I believe, there.
33 and 34. And if remember, you're asking the board to give you 50 units on a dry area that maybe you could get 15 or 17 conventional units on, and
32, I think.
And that was in your conventional plan.
Yeah.
And if you just moved those houses, got rid of them, relocated them elsewhere on the land, then you could in fact have a graded road that came through the existing granite rather than remove all of the existing granite. And the whole project would be much less visible from Tobacco Road. You would have to, drive in 100 feet before you even saw the first house, and you might be able, if you left enough of the original ledge on the left of your driveway there, as you've shown it, if you left enough of that original ledge and sort of, tunneled through it, not tunnel's the wrong way, cut through it, you might really hide a large part of this development from Tobacco Road.
You're talking about creating like a ledge face.
That would be a fairly small sacrifice, going from 50 to 48 units to, not appease, but at least gain some support by the neighbors. It wouldn't just shout out at them. It would be as if you had to kind of go through this pathway, and then you come upon the development. So that would, to me, if I lived on Tobacco Road, which I don't, that would make it much easier to stomach this development. But I realize that it probably would require sacrificing 2 units. And at least for the first 100 feet off of Tobacco Road, trying to leave as much natural as possible and just get your driveway through there, and then you come upon the development. It's just a different idea, rather than have the development totally go right up to the edge of Tobacco Road, have it start 100 or 150 feet in. That would be my idea.
Okay.
Okay, so I'd like to back up a little bit. And I had requested a 3D model, which thank you for doing that. And part of the reason for asking the 3D model is this is a fairly complex site topographically, slope-wise. And so one of the advantages of doing the 3D model is to understand what the grading is doing, existing and proposed at the entry to Tobacco Road. And so what I would request first is that you amend these renderings so that those slopes behind the houses are accurately portrayed. So what I appreciate is your foreground topography, your vegetation, your landscaping, your building masses all appear very, accurately portrayed through the 3D model. What I find a little bit problematic is everything behind the buildings appears to be photoshopped in, and your tree canopy would be actually quite a bit higher, and you would have your 2-to-1 slopes with you have your grassed slopes behind the buildings. So for example, behind unit 35 and 34, you have a 20-foot rise. So it looks like your roof line's around elevation 86. Top of slope behind those units is 90. Elevation.
Do you mean, I'm going to show this again because I think it's easier to speak about it when you're looking at it for us.
So that's perfect. That's perfect. So what's missing in your renderings is an appreciation and understanding of what that site section shows. So all 3 of these renderings are missing that information. So
you just want to see the tree I'm sorry. You would like to see the tree canopy behind the buildings.
I would
so
like
you
to see
want
the
us
slopes.
to actually show what it is. We thought we were because of the vision slope, but I mean, we can go back and take another look. I mean, I don't want to throw these out because the expense of them is astronomical.
No, you shouldn't need to throw them out. You could use these shots. For example, if I'm assuming if you did a 3D model that those slopes behind the buildings are modeled. Is that true?
I would have to ask if Brent, are you on the line? Hey, Brent Cole, Mr. Ruth, if you could make him part of the panel so that he could actually speak, because he did these cross sections and then provided them to the person that actually modeled it for us. One moment, Mr. Poor. I see him coming on. Here we go.
Okay.
So, Brent, I think you heard Mr. Poor's comment. Did you model? I'm going to jump up. I apologize for jumping around, guys, but I'm going to jump to the wrong slide, by the way, too, each time. Did you actually model behind homes in all of these pictures?
So, for the record, my name is Brent Cole with Granite Engineering. To my right is my colleague, Jeff Merritt. The architect has our 3D model, and they were able to depict the grades behind the buildings. I supplied the planning board with cross sections, and from those cross sections, you could see that from the perspective A201, you really wouldn't be able to see any of the cut slope behind the buildings. You would only see the tree line above the roof line, which is depicted on these plans. The tree line was an assumed tree line elevation on the cross sections. It may be a little bit smaller in the renderings, but a bigger tree line in the renderings would only make this project look look better. We certainly could ask to revise, but I don't know if it would really dramatically change much. I do believe that the renderings are an accurate depiction of what our 3D model shows.
Right, but Jonathan's point is, Mr. Porter's point is, can we revise it? Will there, in your opinion, will there be a change? And is it possible to revise that?
Before we do that, let's not debate that for the moment. Let me just finish the, let me just go over a few numbers, and then I want to back up to Tobacco Road context for a second. So, basically, through some calculations and some sight lines, it would appear that from various vantage points on the street, depending upon where you take the shots, you would see the top of the 90-foot slope. So you're at the street, you're standing at 55, and you're looking over and between buildings, and basically the roof lines from units 34 and 35. Roof line is 86, looking at 90 and 130 behind it for the top of slope. Unit 33 is at 96, and again, you're looking uphill to 130-degree elevation, top of slope. So even all the way up at unit 29, the roof line is roughly 124 with 130-foot elevation slope behind it. So you're generally your top of slope, where the edge of disturbed landscape is generally above your roof lines. And while maybe the views you chose doesn't show that, my calculations tell me that at various points you see those slopes. So, but let me just segue to Tobacco Road for a second. So, because those slopes need to be discussed in a variety of different sort of contexts. Tobacco Road, it's sort of interesting to survey it a bit, and what I did is I just looked at the landscape characteristics at the street edge, I looked at the driveways, I looked at the structures, I looked at the signage, the miscellaneous road furniture, and then any exceptions to the patterns in it. So as far as the landscape characteristics of the street edge, generally, all the way up and down the street, there are, in most places, undisturbed forest, including the understory vegetation and detritus. The only places it is disturbed is with smaller houses, and those smaller houses are nestled into the natural slope behind it, again with undisturbed forest. The larger properties have generally completely undisturbed forest as frontage, and then quite often their driveways are head off, even if there isn't a slope, at an oblique angle, so that it's difficult to see the structures on the street frontage. And if it is going up a slope, the driveways tend to again traverse the slope at an oblique angle, so you can't really see what's up the driveway. And I don't think there are any driveways that have been blasted to get through. Not to say that you can't blast, but I'm just saying, I'm just observing what the pattern is. So any of the buildings that are on the Tobacco Road are modest in scale. Again, their backdrop is they have street trees in front with the forest detritus removed from under those street trees, lawn coming forward, but then undisturbed forest right behind them. And then again, any larger structures have the forest in front of them. Generally, the signage and the road furniture, or any structures, are fairly naturalistic in character. For example, the signage at the public landing is something that you might see, similar to something you might see in like a state park or national park. It's a natural landscape boulder with a bronze sign on it. The exceptions to this pattern are the Manchester transfer station, which I realize is beyond the town lines, but it's interesting to note because the Manchester transfer station is sort of characterized by undisturbed forest in the foreground, sometimes quite a bit of forest in the foreground. But the unusual thing is you can see through the forest, because it's a deciduous forest, you can see through it, and what you notice most dramatically is the 2-to-1 slope that makes up the actual body of the transfer station that stands out starkly in contrast to all of the other elements of Chabaco Road. So that was just my observation about what makes up Chabaco Road. And so sort of segueing off of Bill's comments, I think that a really great solution and a really great alternative to this, the way this is proposed, because you have 300 feet of disturbance, and the greatest distance between undisturbed trees in any place along Chabaco Road is about 50 or 60 feet. So you have 300 feet of disturbed area, and again, most of it's natural forest. So by relooking at the grading, relooking at your alignment of your road, and using some of the sort of patterns that are visible on Chabaco Road, there are many ways to screen this proposal and have much less disturbance along the street front, have far fewer visible 2-to-1 slopes in the background behind these buildings. And again, I believe that many of these are going to be visible, even though you've chosen shots where it's not visible, and I don't see that the slopes have been modeled. So I think there are ways to get this project more in alignment with the context of Chabaco Road. Now, this is where it comes back around to, this whole thing is sort of, everything's all interwoven here in terms of decisions. If we were to actually start with the purpose of the bylaw, what's interesting is 8.2.1.1 talks about variety of housing. And I would just be curious why, as an applicant, it couldn't be explored to have maybe some cluster housing up in the middle of the project instead of this kind of dense sort of subdivision pattern, which is forcing your slopes to come right out to Chabaco Road, your first unit
I mean,
is right on the
we've
road.
designed it, I guess, so that I'm going to come back to the front. So I'm not sure what you mean by cluster development, but I mean, keep going, and I'll address everything at the beginning. I just figured I'd show you this.
So basically, the question would be, you know, if we have units 34 and 35 are really pretty hard up against the road, and then right behind them are these steep slopes and a lot of cut to the topography and a lot of removal of native trees, which again is not in character with what I just described, is the nature of the entire length of Chabaco Road. I would concur with Bill that getting these first couple buildings further upslope in maybe a denser fashion, and that's why I said cluster. Maybe 8.2.1.1 says variety of building types and variety of price points. That's not the word, but it's a variety of somebody can help me with the wording. So I'm not saying that density isn't a good thing. I'm saying density is a good thing, but let's try to get it in the right location and not have it being pressed against Chabaco Road, where I believe it's not in harmony with any of the neighborhood. And in addition to that, and now this jumps again, you've got your steepest slopes for driveways and sidewalks right at your critical intersections. And addressing this could probably mitigate those issues as well. You know, because instead, just as I mentioned elsewhere on Chabaco Road, you have traversed and oblique angle driveways, which mitigate the effect of a driveway coming steeply down to Chabaco Road, and instead it's traversing the hill at an angle, making for a safer departure from the driveway into the street. By using Bill's suggestion, you could achieve some of those things. And I think some of those things come up in peer review. I'll stop talking now.
So I can address some of those things. I mean, this street is exceptionally safe. It comes in at a flat angle, like any subdivision road. It doesn't, it grades up to a 10% slope because it's a minor street, which is permitted to do under regulation, subdivision regulations. So the roadway itself, controls a lot of the design of the project. Relative to moving units, I mean, that requires a lot of different aspects. Plus, the comparison and the purposes of the bylaw is not, is Tobacco Road undeveloped? Of course it's undeveloped. This property has never been developed, but it can be. So the comparison is what would happen in a conventional sense, what would happen in senior housing, and how does senior housing support those purposes? See, that's the critical factor, and everybody needs to remember the purposes are not a general thing, it's a comparative thing. Senior housing is intended to create, to Mr. Poor's point, cluster, to basically join units, have less sprawl, and to be able to have more living space in a tighter area. I mean, quite frankly, we're saving 75% of the property is untouched. 75%. In a cluster, that's beautiful. In a conventional setting, that's why when you compare, you need to compare what can really happen. And this will preserve 75%, and that will be preserved forever in a restriction. Traditional development would not. Now, that's not saying that we can't, discuss alternatives, and we appreciate the comments. Like, this is a good, constructive back and forth, and this helps us. This is like productive. This was what we were hoping we would hear from the other side as well, instead of constant negativism, productivity, and that's what we want to do. So we're going to take these comments tonight. We're going to look at the landscape plan. Relative to those two units, I mean, every project is an economic component of it, and I don't know that those units can be moved. I don't know that any of that can happen, but I do know that the roadway has to come in that one location, and the way that roadway is designed and where it's located is the only place it can go. So, those are the constraints when you're putting in a full subdivision roadway. But we're going to go back and we're going to listen to all your comments and we're going to talk about them.
Is it
So we do
fair?
appreciate
I was looking back over you.
Joe, if I may interject, there was a conversation about the roadway not necessarily being safe.
It's safe.
The town has given guidelines on what they deem as safe, and this road was built to the town standards. I don't recall any peer review comments relative to the safety of the actual roadway. The town has put in standards of what they deem as safe, and that's anything, or that what they deem as steep, and that's anything above 10%. And that is what this roadway was designed to, or at least the first portion was that 10% standard, which is well within the town roadway standards. So I just wanted to clear the record for the safety.
And I did say that, but also when we first come in, we basically have a flat approach because it's less than a 3% grade, and we comply with that aspect when you're coming off. So you don't come into the development at a grade pitch.
Of course not. There's a safety platform at the bottom for them to come to a stop near the stop sign and the stop bar.
But again, these are good comments. These are the things we love to hear and engage in with the board, and we appreciate them. Back to the chair.
Yep, and Emil, after Jonathan's comments, what more can you say?
This could be, honestly, this could be a conversation that goes on for hours. Ms. Mann, I think you opened up a couple of things that I'd love to get into at some point, probably not tonight, because it looks like this particular topic is the entrance. And one thing I always liked was a definition of a site plan, which is a synthesis of the art of man with the beauty of nature. And if you look at the renderings, with all respect, there's nothing there that represents anything of what's existing there on a site. It's all new work. And so there's not a synthesis going on. And one of the aspects of trying to incorporate a new construction into an existing setting is to use what's already there to your advantage, to use it in a way that makes it effective. One of the striking things driving along that road is that ledge outcrop. Now, I know you need to run a road through to get up there. That's no question about that. But I think Bill's comment that It's where you place the buildings that makes all the difference. And one of the things I would like to have come out of this discussion is to get you as the applicant to complete the site plan showing all of the conservation-like features on the area which is now going to be developed. Right now, it appears to be like a blank spot in the middle of your basic plan. And I think identifying all the steep slopes greater than 25%, which is sort of the standard for conservation subdivisions, 25 and now 50%, you're using those on your slopes. But to map to identify all of the features, not only the wetlands and buffer areas, but the steep slopes, and identify it perhaps in color. You have that information on your drawings. They're on the 30 scale site plan drawings, and you can piece 4 of them together to give you one 100 scale plan and color it, because part of the reason I think Jonathan wanted those renderings along Chabaco Road is to show how the landscape is going to change there. Now, we know it needs to change. That's not a discussion. But how it changes becomes the critical part of this, and it's where the design, it's where the art of man comes into this, that what is happening here right at the entrance is really a deformation of the land to serve a couple of buildings. And again, in terms of the larger picture, I'm glad to hear you're open to some other commentary, but one comment I will make as an architect, you picked a typology here, a single-family dwelling on a steep slope site that is probably the worst choice you could make to to build on it if you have any intention of keeping the character of the site. It just does not work. Or what it does is create a huge land grab because it's so sprawling. By having single-story buildings or some two-story buildings side by side, going up the hill, across the top, and then placing the road in. I think I read one of the peer reviews that the overall impervious area is about 6+ acres. That represents almost 40% of your property is impervious. And when you talk about LID construction, low impact development construction, that's way over what they would really use as a guideline. They're down around 15% would be good LID rates. And then the road. I'm going to stop here because we're just talking about the entrance, but I hope we can continue this conversation going up the hill to the major part of the site, because I have a lot of comments once we get to the top. But for now, I think those comments along Chabaco about nobody expects you to match a single-family house setting. That wasn't the idea, but it was to maintain the rural character of that in ways that I'm sure your designers are really creative, and they could come up with ways to do that. So we're really nowhere near settling what kind of plant material is going to be down there. We're still trying to understand what's happening on the site, and I think that's why Jonathan was asking for that information, and why I would like to see information on the steep slopes on the upper part of the site that you're going to develop. Thank you.
I mean, we can provide that type of information, but relative to the changes in the site, again, 75% of this property will be untouched. This is not, it's a cluster development. In an LID development, when you're talking about a conventional subdivision, you aren't wrong. But when you look at 6%, we are modifying less than 10% of the entire property and converting it to impervious. So that is exceptionally in keeping with what you're saying, and in fact below. You can't isolate it. You cannot say, what's your development? You cannot say, create a dense development area and then say, well, the impervious area is of 40%. You must look at the entire site. That's the point. The point is to make it a dense development. The point is to bring everything together, and the point is to reduce impervious properties. And again, it's less than 10% of the entire site. That's Herculean. Relative to the property that we're going to be developing, yes, it will be taken down. There are two choices here, and that's what the senior housing bylaw is all about. The choice is by right uses, right, that require sprawl, and that's that will give you properties that look just like everybody else's, which most of them had to have had some form of blasting probably on the other side. At least that's what we kind of get an impression on. Maybe they had none, I don't know. But we do know that we need to. And we do know that this is better for the town. It provides everything with regard to your purposes. It doesn't create entrances. It keeps the bucolic nature of the farm. I mean, all of the purposes I can go through, and you compare senior with conventional, and there's some conflict. So either you want a conventional development where you're not going to see the homes, they're pushed back, but if I were to do an assessment of each of those homes, my guess is they occupy far more than 10% of their lot with regard to impervious area. And that's the point. This entire thing is less than that. So I just want to make sure everybody understands, we realize that we're making a development that's dense. We recognize that, but that's what you call for in your senior housing. That's what your one of your actual specific purposes is it says, you know, basically to have concentrated development to avoid sprawl and preserve open space. That's your purpose of this bylaw. So again, back to the chair.
Okay, very good. We've talked really about the site entrance, and I think we've talked about, in general terms, review and grading and roadway and unit layout. So before we move on to the last topic, inclusion area, I want to see if there are any comments from the public.
Yes.
One hand raised and 3 questions, it looks like. Deborah.
Okay, why don't we go to the person that has their hand raised?
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Deborah Ellison, Ellison Law Office, 63 Middle Street, Gloucester. I represent Save Tobacco Trails and Watershed, Inc. First of all, would I just like to comment a little bit on the proposed framework that was proposed by Mr. Poor and I believe Emil. One comment is that with regard to work product and the example that was given, 8.2.1.1, one of the topics is preliminary findings and making preliminary findings as you go along. And that's fine, but in certain circumstances that would be premature. Particularly where you're asking for additional information or additional details. So I would just suggest that that would have to be taken on a case-by-case basis. And then also, in addition, I think another category should be conditions. Many times, developments and special permits are conditioned. So I think as you go through your analysis, you should think about what the conditions might be also. I'd like to thank the board for looking so closely at the issue of the entrance. And right now we are restricting our comments to the entrance. And I do agree that this is, with Attorney Mann, that this is going to be an intersection. But when you look at any of the intersections that she showed us, none of them had this type of landscaping or level of landscaping. They were much more rural, much more simple, and much more like Tobacco Road, which is what many of the board members have said. And so I think it is important that we look at what this subdivision will look like as people drive up to it and what the neighbors will be looking at. And we've heard a couple times from the applicant that there are certain economics. Well, there are economics, but those aren't necessarily what the bylaw is concerned about. The developer certainly is concerned about the economics, but that's really not for the planning board to consider. The planning board is considering the purposes and the findings that it has to make under the senior bylaw. And you also have to make findings under the general special permit bylaw. So you need to remember to keep those things in mind, which also look at the detriment to the neighborhood and making it in keeping with the neighborhood. So you certainly are going down the right track with examining whether or not this matches the neighborhood that surrounds it. I'd also, the applicant is also constantly speaking about you have to look at this as a senior housing versus a conventional plan that they can do. Well, they've presented you with a conventional plan, but not one that has been through the process or approved. And so just sort of dividing the lots up and using the numbers that for lot area, they've come up with 32 units, but they're proposing 50. So first of all, just on that basis, they shouldn't be comparing them. But secondly, unless they provide you with a plan that has been approved as a conventional plan, you're not looking at that. The subdivision, the senior housing bylaw does not say you compare it to a conventional plan. It doesn't say that at all. It says that the purpose is to provide cluster, and cluster is certainly fine, but cluster doesn't necessarily mean the density that they're proposing here. So all of those questions I would suggest to you are questions that the planning board should be looking at. And some of the grading issues and the amount of grading and the amount of blasting and all of that will become much more apparent as we go through the site. It's certainly apparent at the entrance, and Mr. Hennigan had begun discussing that the last time, and I think this is an appropriate time for him to go into that in a little bit more detail for you. With regard to what sort of blasting just at this level is required. And also with regard to 75% of the land being saved, most of that is wet, so it's not going to be developed anyway. And so I think we have to also keep that in mind, that a lot of this is being driven by what is upland and what is available for development to the developer. So thank you very much. Those are the only comments I have at the moment.
Okay, thank you.
I just have one correction because it's erroneous information. Most of the open space is not wetland, by the way. It is not. We provide that description and it is not, just to be clear.
Okay, and we'll move on to the questions from the audience.
John Cole had his hand raised.
John Cole.
Hi, John Cole, 66 Chabaco. It's interesting to listen to the comments, particularly the architect's comments about the inappropriateness of this current proposed entranceway. It clearly is, I don't need to get into this with a lot. It just clearly is inappropriate and out of context with the neighborhood, which is, one of the clear objectives of the bylaws. And to follow up on what Deb just said about the alternative plan, it should be known that Toll Brothers, which was the previous company that came in and tried to develop the land, was able to identify 5 buildable lots that would pass with their own perk sites. The 5, not 32, 5 lots was all that they could find. And Toll Brothers, a $7 billion a year company, would have a pretty good knowledge of what they're doing. So we should keep that in mind. And the final comment on this entranceway, just to show its inappropriateness, and we've talked about this a couple times already, but the current blasting is to remove 540,000 cubic feet to create what you see in those pictures of granite. 540,000 cubic feet, 1,333 trucks to haul that away. Now, the applicant is yet to tell us what they're doing with that land, with all that granite, and where they're going to do it. But if anybody that's on this call wants to live in that environment while they remove that 540,000 cubic feet of rock, please let us know. And thank you for listening.
So again, I have to respond to that. It's anecdotal relative to the Toll Brothers. There's no demonstration of 5 lots. It's not good information. It shouldn't have been offered. There's no substance. With regard to the number of cubic feet, we actually have a blast plan.
Jill, there is no
all right.
Mr. Chair,
Jill,
I'm just answering the question.
Jill,
with regard to the number,
your fantasy plan that you show people of 36 lots is a
John,
complete
if you
fantasy.
don't stop talking, we're going to cut you off.
So relative to the blast plan, we actually do have one that will show the cubic yards, which is far overstated. I don't know where Mr. Cole got the number. I'm assuming he looked at the plan and tried to figure it out, but he did not. He's not accurate. I know that's not the correct number. I can't even give you the exact one because what we try to do is to minimize the cuts to make sure we give you accurate information. And we actually have a blast plan, a review of the blast plan, and even an hydrology, which we noted will be mentioned, or I apologize, not mentioned, but discussed at the next meeting, which I'm trying to be on topic. So I just, when bad information is given to you, I just have to respond.
Right.
Back to the chair.
Yeah, and we want to stay on topic here, and we don't want to get into debates about facts or information that has not even been presented yet. So if people are going to make comments, we'd love to hear them, but stay on topic, please.
Thank you.
Questions?
This is the Q&A.
Yeah. Can you read those?
Sure. It looks like the first two were from the previous discussion. Regret. Agenda.
Oh, okay. You mean in terms of scenic byways?
Right.
Scenic roadway? Okay.
Yeah,
So,
I think Al was disappointed his comments weren't heard regarding the road and the proactive safety measures, but I think that was discussed.
okay. These are for a past topic, and we actually did include a great deal of public discussion. So,
These are all on the previous agenda.
and what we don't want to do is repeat the same comments over and over again. I think people were very clear about their concerns about the roadway, and we discussed those quite thoroughly. So any further questions regarding the topic at hand?
It doesn't look, Elizabeth Ransom?
Go ahead. Elizabeth, you're on.
Hi, there we go. I think I'm live now.
You're on.
I'd like to speak specifically to something that both the board and Jill Mann just raised regarding the entrance. And it's something I believe Tom Hennigan from Ransom Consulting has raised in a previous meeting. When we're looking at the cut, Jill's correct. We don't have something from the applicant yet that says this is exactly the volume of rock that's going to be removed and the size of that cut. We have been requesting for a while something that gives us a more detailed cut and fill analysis and a materials management program that would allow us to see what exactly is being removed and how that's being handled. What our firm's been able to sort of generate from the plans using pretty rough estimates is that the cut at the entrance is roughly the same size as 126,000 cubic feet times 4, so about over 500,000 cubic feet of stone removal. And just to give the board some perspective, that's about the equivalent of the Bunker Hill Monument 4 times over. So we're not talking about a trivial amount of stone being removed. And I think it's important for the board to understand how is that volume being removed and what does it look like. And so
Elizabeth, I don't want to
I'm not trying to introduce figures that are very loose into the discussion.
Elizabeth,
We're asking that the applicant provide us some real figures so we can ascertain the issues.
Elizabeth, we want to keep this topic on the discussion. John went off on the cubic feet. We have not gotten to that point, and you're using numbers that have not been substantiated, have not been peer reviewed, and you haven't. And the applicant has not had a chance to present their blasting plan. So if you want to keep on topic, that's great. We'd love to hear your comments, but we need to keep on topic.
Yeah, the on topic part of this is that we would like to see a detailed cut and fill analysis.
Yeah, you will.
That when
in a
we
fe-
speak
you
about
will
the
in a fe-
driveway and the
you
entrance,
will in a
part of the
future
discussion
meeting,
is understanding.
Elizabeth, in a
Do they
future
have the
meeting, you will hear
calculations to
this.
support what is going on through that driveway area? And I think, our comment is just simply, we'd like to see those calculations from the applicant themselves, because we're the first to say it's hard for us to ascertain that from their plans. We don't have their CAD files to do that.
And point of order, Mr. Chairman, my understanding is that the topic was the entranceway, and that's what we're talking about.
And then we're getting into blasting plans. We're getting into blasting plans and cutting.
No, this is not a blasting plan. The blasting plan actually
Stop
talks about
interrupting
how you
me.
blast and protect the
Listen,
infrastructure. I'm talking
Elizabeth.
about how does the entranceway get done?
Elizabeth,
We're talking
if you don't
aesthetics now,
stop
that's the
talking,
point
you're
for
going to
next
get
meeting.
cut off. If this were a public meeting and you were here, you would be ruled out of order. Now, to both the attorney and Elizabeth, when we get to the next section, we will be talking about blasting, cutting, and removal of ledge and stone and rock. We are not there yet. And if we're going to do this efficiently, then we need to stick to the agenda that we've established. So your comments will be welcome at that time, and we'll be using peer-reviewed information to determine what the actual amounts are and how they impact this development. But we are not there yet. So just hold your comments. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I apologize. I did not realize that the topic was limited to aesthetics only at this point. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any more comments or questions from the board?
I would like to ask Attorney Mann one sort of very conceptual question about this. In the as-of-right subdivision plan, it appears that you would be doing at least a similar amount of blasting and rock removal for that plan as this plan. Any development plan on this land is going to put houses on the high, dry part of the land. And so, I mean, it might be more or less blasting, but there's no development plan that I can imagine for this site that doesn't involve a fair amount of blasting and rock removal. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, Mr. Wheaton, it is. Every project is going to involve blasting and a tremendous amount of removal, and tremendous.
Okay.
Okay.
Would you like me to put, well, it's not appropriate yet. I was going to say I could put the plan up, but it's not a topic, so I won't.
Yeah, let's keep that limited.
Yep, I understand.
All right. So I'd like to move on to inclusionary if we can.
Awesome, thank you.
All right. So we, at the last meeting, or maybe 2 meetings ago, Marnie had presented her point of view regarding the inclusionary housing and the interpretation of the bylaw and its application, and the board had a very vigorous discussion about that, and then we decided that we would ask our town council to review both Marnie's information that she presented as well as the bylaw and present her independent, objective interpretation of what the inclusionary housing bylaw, how it should be interpreted or how she interpreted it. And she has provided us with an opinion that, Patrick, correct me if I'm wrong, we just received today. It is, it's subject to a client attorney privilege. So the board would need to approve its release at tonight's meeting for discussion so that everybody is aware of it. And so Patrick, you can help guide me here in this discussion.
let me suggest that the board vote to make this town council confidential opinion available to the public via a vote.
Okay, so what we,
I think we should clarify the intent of this memorandum. I prepared it on September 27th, and I forwarded to the chair, Rick Mitchell, and to Patrick Reffert. And my apologies, I was a little under the weather from my booster shot vaccine, and I maybe did not make it clear that that I didn't necessarily intend that this be forwarded directly to town council, but I was amenable to discussion of its contents. But to the extent that it was forwarded to Lee Smith, I would stand behind it. Apologies for a few typos that I found in rereading it. So it's up to the board whether they would want to have this memo disclosed to the public. The other thing, though, that I did discover in further research were some board minutes, and these are public records, and I actually think they're almost more pertinent to the interpretation of the bylaw than the contents of my memo.
okay, so, but we have, we have a point we need to discuss before we get into your information that you'd like to present, because it's relevant to this memo that the town council has provided to the board. And just for clarification, my recollection is when we had our very animated discussion was that we agreed that we would forward the discussion concern to town council for their interpretation and opinion as to how to interpret the bylaw.
Right.
So that's what we were talking about right now. And the question is, does the board feel comfortable voting to discuss this confidential memo from the town council in public?
Have we gotten a memo from town council?
We have.
I haven't seen it.
No?
You haven't seen it because, as we have been requesting, we need to make this public via a vote by the board.
Right.
So it hasn't been made public yet. That's what we're asking you, and that's what I made the suggestion that we do, is that the board vote to make it public.
Did you transmit it to us, though?
No,
or not?
again, it hasn't been made public. It hasn't gone to the board yet because the board hasn't voted
It goes
to
to the
do so.
town.
Right.
The town is the body. So I have a copy because I'm chair. So, and we want to have a public discussion and release this so that everybody has a chance to discuss it. So that's what's on the table right now. So does the board want to make this document public and have a public discussion?
Maybe we should look at it first.
As a member of the board, I would like to review it before I determine whether or not it should be made public.
Okay.
I feel the same way.
All right. So why don't we go around the board and make this a formal vote? So the question is, do we make the document prepared by town council public so that we can have a public discussion tonight, or do we not and distribute it to planning board members? I think, though, if we distribute it to planning board members, then it becomes a public document.
Exactly.
So you're sort of caught in a,
I don't think so.
in a, in the crosshairs here, so.
Well, if that were the case, then what I would suggest that if the board were to determine to make it public, that the board at least have the opportunity until the next meeting to review it, at which point it will be public and the board and the public can,
No, you're kind of missing the point here. As soon as we release it to the board, it is public information.
well, we haven't
Right,
read it. Oh, we can't have
Mr.
it-
Chairman, but I don't think we need to discuss it tonight. If there's a view that we want to reflect on this a bit before we
Well,
have a public
you
debate
can
on it.
reflect on it all you want, and we can continue this discussion. The question is, do you want to see the document or not? I mean, nobody's saying that we have to come to a conclusion. It's a matter of, do you want to have this document released so that you can read it? And we can discuss it.
Yeah, just a question, Marnie, you indicated you would change something?
Well, no,
Your information you,
actually, I think there's some confusion here. At least I'm confused. So I drafted a memo
Yeah.
that I directed to our town council.
right,
And it was pertinent to our discussion on the inclusionary housing bylaw.
right.
I forwarded that to the chairman and to Patrick Breffert, and it was my understanding that they forwarded that memo to Lee Smith, our town council. I was led to believe that that happened. I would be
And it
appreciative.
did.
And it did. And so now we have a
You know,
response.
this is not the Supreme Court here. We asked town council to review your memo, to look at the bylaw, to look at town meeting vote, to look at the minutes of previous boards to try and determine what is a reasonable interpretation of the inclusionary housing bylaw. So, you know, you can read it all you want. It isn't going to change her opinion. So if you'd like to know what her opinion is, then we can have that discussion. If you'd not like to have that discussion, then we won't have that discussion.
Well, that was the only
looking
thing
for
I
a
was trying to get at, that, is there other information that might alter the attorney's, town council's
No.
reports? The answer is no.
No, because Marnie prepared a very well-written memo supporting her information. And the attorneys, everybody's information was provided to the attorney, and then she went and did, it's Robin, what's her last name?
Robin Stein.
Robin Stein went and did her own independent, objective analysis, not taking anybody's word for fact, and looked at the bylaw, read the bylaw, looked at the minutes of previous meetings, looked at the vote by town meeting, and looked at prior decisions by the planning board, and developed her own interpretation of what she thinks the inclusionary housing bylaw, how it should be interpreted in terms of the fees that should be required by any applicant who's developing a project in Hamilton.
So given that we obviously need the information, but I concur, I would be in favor of voting on that tonight to make it public, but not to decide tonight would be my position.
I mean, we're just having, you know, this is like a continuation of the discussion.
Mr. Chairman, we would love to see this expert opinion or this legal opinion. So sure, of course.
Do you need a motion or do we just roll call vote?
Yes, we do need a motion to make it public.
Then I make a motion to accept into public record the town clerk's response.
I second that motion.
Okay, and we'll do a roll call vote.
Emil Dahlquist, aye.
Jonathan Poor, aye.
Bill Wheaton, aye.
Marnie Crouch, aye.
Corey Beaulieu, aye.
Rick Mitchell, aye. Okay, so Patrick, you have copies?
Yes, I
You're
do.
going to pass it out. So now we'll take a brief break. People can read it, and then we'll have a discussion.
Put the hold news on.
Is this the memo about the formula, Mr. Mitchell?
This is this is regarding, because the question was the interpretation by you, the applicant, accurate, or as Marnie had a different interpretation of the intent of the bylaw. So that was the whole point of the discussion, and then the question was, we went to the town council and asked for their review of the inclusionary housing bylaw, and the amendment that was made in 219 and how that should be interpreted given the wording of the bylaw, the minutes that she reviewed of the planning board discussion when it came up to change that formula, and also the town meeting, the language presented to town meeting.
So can we see a copy of it?
Yes. Copy will be made available to everybody. But obviously, we couldn't send it to you until we made it public.
No, sure. I apologize for my confusion. I'm just unsure. Are we going to discuss it tonight? Are you going to tell us? I mean, obviously, it's town council's opinion.
Yes.
But it's really the board's opinion that matters, and I'm just confused. Are you going to read it and decide if you agree, or are you going to?
Well, no, I think, I'll be, I'll be corrected by anybody on this board or anybody else, is that we will have a discussion about it. You will have a chance to, read it and make a reply.
Tonight?
No.
Oh, all right. That's what I was getting confused about. I apologize.
No, I think because, and we also need to supply it to the public and Ms. Eliason and all the interested parties, so they have copies of it as well. So we're not going to have a definitive decision tonight, Patrick?
Would it be helpful if I read this into the record? It's only 2 pages.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful if you're
Okay.
feeling up to reading it.
I'll read through my mask. To Rick Mitchell, Chair, members of the Planning Board, Hamilton Town Hall, regarding fee in lieu of affordable housing units, zoning bylaw section 8.3.4.3. Dear members of the Planning Board, pursuant to section 8.3.4.3 of the town's zoning bylaw, a developer may meet its obligation to provide affordable housing units by paying a fee in lieu of constructing the required affordable units. You have asked for guidance regarding the calculation of the fee. Next paragraph. Based on the facts set forth therein, or herein, and on the language of the second sentence of section 8.3.4.3, it is my opinion that the fee for each required affordable unit should be 3 times the base area median income, AMI, as determined by the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, for an income limit area that includes the town of Hamilton, without accounting for household size or income level. Next paragraph. The pertinent facts as I understand them are as follows. There is currently pending before the Planning Board an application for a senior housing special permit pursuant to section 8.2 of the bylaw, which project also requires the provision of affordable units pursuant to section 8.3 of the bylaw. Next paragraph. Section 8.3.4.3, as published in the version of the bylaw currently available in town's website, including amendments up to October 22nd, 2019, provides that an equivalent fee in lieu of units for each required unit shall be 3 times the area median income as determined by HUD income limits, which includes Hamilton. There has been discussion between the project applicant, the planning board, and the public regarding the proper calculation of the fee, including if and to what extent household size and income levels are relevant. Prior to bylaw amendment adopted by the town at the April 6, 2019 town meeting, parentheses, Article 2019/4/3-2, the amendment, section 8.3.4.3, was numbered section 8.3.4.4 and provided as follows. An equivalent fee in lieu of units may be made. The planning board may allow a developer of non-rental dwelling units to make a cash payment to the town through that's a typo there, Affordable Housing Trust Fund for each affordable housing unit they're required herein. The cash payment per unit shall be in accordance with the following formula: 2 times an amount equal to 80% of area median income for a family of 4 in the metropolitan or non-metropolitan area that includes the town of Hamilton, as determined annually by HUD. The amendment removed all but the first sentence of section 8.3.4.4, thus eliminating the formula based on income level and household size. The town also created a new way of calculating the fee by adding a new sentence to the new section 8.3.4.3 that provides a fee in lieu payment for each required unit shall be 3 times the area median income as determined by HUD income limits, which includes Hamilton. Thus, as amended, it appears that the new section 8.3.4.3 provides an equivalent fee in lieu of units may be made. A fee in lieu payment for each required unit shall be 3 times the AMI as determined by HUD income limits, which includes Hamilton. Next paragraph. Of note, on March 19th, 2019, the Planning Board held a public hearing on the amendment. The minutes from the Planning Board public hearing indicate it was agreed that the board wanted to pursue obtaining the full median income rather than a percentage. Accordingly, and this is the attorney speaking, in my opinion, the fee for each required affordable unit shall be 3 times the base AMI as determined by HUD for the income limit that includes the town of Hamilton without accounting for household size or income limit. Please let me know if there are any additional facts which I should be aware, and I can review the same for any impact on this opinion. Otherwise, if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to contact me. Thank you. Very truly yours, Robin Stein.
Well, that's a very different number. You don't consider the 80%, and you don't consider the number of household members. You take the simple median income period, which I think in your memo was 114,000. So you take in what you requested.
It actually
80% of that was 97,000, but we're not supposed to do the 80%.
Right.
So you take 114 times 3. So it's 342,000 units, $342,000 per unit.
After I prepared the memo, I actually did what the attorney at KP Law did, and I went and I reviewed the minutes from the planning board meetings that preceded the April 2019 town meeting at which the amendment to the bylaw was adopted, and it was clear to me. It was made even more clear that the bylaw, the wording of the bylaw as it exists now, just didn't cover those types of considerations. I mean, there was nothing about household size, and really nothing about percentages. And in fact, when I read the minutes from the March 19th Planning Board meeting, it almost occurred to me that there might have been a typo in the draft of the bylaw that went to town meeting, because at that time, the chair, Brian Stein, suggested ending the definition sentence with the word HUD.
But she says the same thing.
Right, but that would have eliminated the reference to limits, which I think when you read the bylaw, that the appearance of the word limits was rather an odd formulation. So I have to say I agree with the attorney for KP Law. Not a surprise.
Really. So the net impact, as it is currently, assuming and we have not heard from the applicant or any other people in this, so as the town council said, if there are other pertinent facts or information that should be considered, we'll wait until we hear those before we make a decision as to whether this is the way we want to go. But for comparison purposes, if you took the 6 units times 80% of AMI, using the 2-unit number, yielded $485,100. Under the new interpretation of 100% of AMI, it yields $720,100. No, $720,000 equally. So the difference is about $234,900 between the two interpretations. So that's what we got from the town attorney. You can read it in detail. We will make sure that, Jill, you get a copy of this, that Attorney Eliason gets a copy of this. It's a public document, so anybody can now read this. I suggest we wait until at least the next meeting for any and all other comments that people might want to make, or other facts or information that may come to light, and then we make a decision as to whether we accept this or not.
Is there any possibility, given the fact that we're supposed to be talking about our hydrology, and based on the information that you just presented, you could completely create a need for us to really go back and review, and any type of reduction in the number of units would, quite frankly, be impossible based on, I think, the numbers you just read, because it doesn't address income limits, which clearly is stated in the bylaw. But that aside, is it possible to have a special meeting to get this matter resolved before our November 9th meeting? Because at that meeting, we planned on bringing in all of our experts relative to hydrology, geology, and water, and that is a very large bill for us, and I need to understand better what this component is, because based on what you just told me, I completely disagree, because income limits mean something, and that was totally ignored in that memo.
No, I understand, and that's why I just made the statement I did, that
I understood.
That gets distributed. I'm a little confused, Jill, in terms of your desire that this will have a material impact on the number of units. We haven't even discussed the number of units. As I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong, we're talking 6 units that would be deemed affordable under our inclusionary housing bylaw. The only difference is the amount of money that would be paid to the Affordable Housing Trust.
I just meant that there was conversation about trying to get us to reduce the number of units earlier in the hearing.
No.
And when I heard this number,
Yeah, right.
I'm a little confused about the number, because I'm not so sure we know exactly. I agree with what Mr. Wheaton said. It's $300-something thousand if you don't use income limits. I just don't think I think the attorney missed an entire component.
I get that. So that's
I need to see it, though. You're right, Mr. Mitchell. I apologize for the diversion.
If I might chime in here for a minute, I think the problem is that the bylaw was written without full clarity. Okay,
Well, yes,
so, and the
clearly.
fact is that the bylaw is the bylaw right now, and it is the guiding document.
Yep.
So whether we like it or not, we should, I think, abide by the bylaw formula?
Well,
I'm just tossing that out, I'm not a lawyer.
That's where we may ultimately end up, but in all fairness to the applicant and to the public, and to any other party to this discussion, they should have an opportunity to review the attorney's memo to the board. That's why we made it public. So if there's any other pertinent information or facts that we need to consider before we make decision, we get that.
Totally agree.
So that's what I'm focused on now, Jill, just that number. What's the dollar amount here? Is it 100% of AMI or some other number that is, for example, what you had originally proposed?
Right, and I agree, and I just
Attorneys-
want to point out, Mr. Wheaton, I agree, we need to follow the bylaw, to the letter of the bylaw. The opinion you just read does not. She ignores completely the words income limits.
Right, and that's
my
why
only issue.
you will get a copy of this, and you'll have an opportunity to submit to the board
Okay.
your, what's the word I want? Refutation? No.
My opinion, yes.
Your opinion as to her interpretation, and then the board will have to come up with a decision as to which way they want to go. So there's another component piece of this, and that was the interpretation of the bylaw as to whether, and I think this is the question, as to whether the units, the 6 units are built off-site, or the 6 units reduce the 50 units to 44.
I thought we had that discussion because of Canterbrook and Patton Ridge.
Well, that was just on the agenda. I just wanted to.
Oh.
I just wanted to see if there were any further discussion on that. I don't think there is, but that was on the topic for discussion. And Patrick's, you included that in your timeline.
All we discussed last week was whether or not the project qualified as a 50-unit project based on its land area.
Yeah.
Not on whether or not it was 44 units to full value and 6 units to affordable, or 50 units to full value, 6 units affordable.
Right, and that wasn't brought up by, as far as I know, and correct me if I'm wrong, by any member of the board. That
I brought
was,
it up when I said 50.
Excuse me?
I said when Attorney Eliason had made mention of a 44 unit and 6, I said I agreed with her, but 50 is the base. You said, okay, 50 is the base, let's move on.
Yes. So the discussion point is, are these units external units being paid in lieu of, or as somebody has tried to assert that those 6 units should be deducted from the original 50. Now, the 2 prior projects, that was not done. The funds were provided based on the base units that we determined were 50, and that the payment in lieu of was paid to the Affordable Housing Trust based on the number of external units.
But the bylaw says in 8.3.2, all involving the creation of 10 or more units, the 10th is required to be affordable, and every 7th thereafter. And that's for external units. And so when it moves on to talk about the methods of returning that, it says the board may approve one or more of the following methods or any combination thereof. And in my opinion, that ties together a unit and the value of a unit.
I'm sorry, say.
So it specifically mentions that the 10th unit and every 7th thereafter is to be physically built as affordable?
We've already agreed on that formula.
Okay, so then the next step, it moves on to say, the planning board may approve one or more of the following methods or any combination thereof for the provision of affordable housing units, which in my opinion ties together the payment in lieu and the building of the actual unit, because the 3 methods outlined are to build it on-site, build it off-site, or pay in lieu of.
Right, and my point was that in the 2 prior projects, it was not, that interpretation was not used. So they That doesn't mean we can't do it here. I'm just saying precedent has been that we gave them the base units, 50 units, which we already agreed to. So it's kind of like trying to go back and rewrite a decision we already made last week.
The decision I made last week was that I agreed with the interpretation of 44 units, physical, 6 units payment in lieu of, therefore a base density of 50 is met.
Okay.
If we may present our view, I mean, I think it's pretty clear. You don't do that calculation. You don't do it in any jurisdiction in which this formula is used. And most certainly we were entitled to rely on the 2 decisions that were previous, and that's a reasonable interpretation. What you're asking is for a board to pay twice. You're saying, yeah, those units count, but they don't really. So now you can't have them, but you got to pay all of that money as well. That isn't how it works. You have a total number. You have affordable housing units. The money to pay that overage to be able to allow you to develop off-site comes from something. It doesn't come from reducing the number.
It specifically says the 10th unit is to be
of the bylaw.
affordable.
It says the 10th unit becomes an affordable unit. You need to build that unit, then you're actually able to sell it. And then you make money and you still have an affordable unit. But what you're trying to do is to actually penalize the applicant, in this instance, for not being able to build on site. We'd love to build on site, but in order to do so, we defy your bylaw.
Your preference is only one of the 3 options. You have 2 other remaining options, build it off-site or pay in lieu of.
And she's
In your
chosen.
town, there's no option to build off-site because you can't build duplexes by right anywhere. It's not, trying, and by the way, what that would mean is maybe buying down, and maybe based on this formula, we will opt for something different. I don't know yet. But my whole point here is you need to make a decision relative to what your bylaw says. You have 2 instances in which you deemed it to be one way. You need to have a relevant and compelling reason to all of a sudden change your mind, because as applicants, we're entitled to rely on what a reasonable interpretation is of a bylaw, and in fact, one in which that has been supported and the language has not been changed.
Yeah, I mean, for me, and I'm speaking personally, not for the board, is this defies logic, because you can't, in both economic and reasonableness, you can't ask an applicant to cut the number of units they're building and pay a fee in lieu of. It makes absolutely no sense. So, and we just went through a great deal of angst and cost to the town to ask if the inclusionary housing bylaw, what was the formula for paying in lieu of, and now we're back to discussing, well, maybe we just don't want to do that, which flies in the face of logic for me.
Mr. Chairman, if I may address the board before they decide. With regard to this whole issue, the bylaw doesn't say anything, as Attorney Mann says, about not including these affordable units and not including them in the account. So her whole discussion about how they're being penalized is really unfounded. And with regard to the precedent, there is no precedent. And the board is not bound by its prior decisions. The board is bound by what the bylaw says. And the bylaw says that you have 50 units as a maximum, and that 6 of those units have to be affordable. And if they're not going to be affordable, and you're going to pay in lieu, then you don't get to build those 6 units. I think it's as simple as that.
Right. I agree with you. I agree with
I
100.
disagree
I
with that.
agree with
By the
you.
way, you are compelled by precedent and by prior decisions unless there's a compelling reason to dislodge your prior rationale. That is not true, because an applicant is entitled to rely on this board's proper actions. So you have to demonstrate that you're not arbitrary and capricious, number one. Number two, the point of the matter is you don't take away units. If you were to build an affordable, you create a base. Out of the base, you deliver affordable units in one way or another. You don't reduce the base. One way or another, you give an affordable housing unit, either provided on site or pay what it sounds like an exceptional amount of money to the town of Hamilton. This isn't a penalty provision. It's to make equal. And by reducing the number of units to 44, it is a penalty. It is not linked to any rational connection. And your two prior decisions, you're going to have to find that they were erroneous. That's how you can dislodge what was done in the past. You can't just arbitrarily decide that the board was wrong.
And obviously, Attorney Mann and I disagree on this topic.
So I'd like to hear from the other board members.
I read the bylaw the same way Corey read it. However, I was not involved in those two previous applications. I have no idea how that was interpreted, so I have to plead ignorance on that. But as I read the bylaw and look at its logic, I would agree with Corey.
I was also not on the prior board.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It looks, for some reason, I thought this was going to be part of the town council's decision, but I guess I was misinformed. I was absent that night, but I watched it. So my understanding is, again, would be what Jonathan and Corey came up with, their conclusion. And I don't see it as a penalty at all, but I'd suggest we consider going back to the town council to get a decision on that.
Oh, boy.
Well, it's a legal matter.
And it's a significant legal matter.
Say again?
It is a significant matter, I believe.
It is, and it's going to be totally discretionary, but go ahead. Bill?
I think the dollar number is clear, but the question of the number of units and whether it's a penalty or whether it's in addition to the 50 units, I think that's a legal question that we have to ask town council about.
Okay. Marnie?
Well, in this instance, I actually don't really read the bylaw that way. I think the bylaw actually could be crafted better. I mean, I think that the fee in lieu, by being divorced from construction costs, if you will, makes it difficult to interpret. But I don't really see that the relationship between the number of required affordable units and the payment in lieu should be disassociated. And I think that the 50 units and a payment for 6 units should not result in a reduction to 44 units. That it doesn't make sense to me. So in this instance, I would have to concur with the prior decisions of the board. But I recognize that we're not bound by those prior decisions. We have to apply the bylaw as written. And then my only further comment was that it's never a bad idea to have the opinion of town council on these issues, because it's the kind of small matter that could generate some type of appeal down the road. And to the extent that we're firm in our conviction of what this section was intended to do, I would not object to referring it to town council, although I don't quite read it the way my colleagues do.
Okay. Well, it sounds like we're going to have to refer this to town council. Patrick? Okay. So we will take a vote on referring this question to town council. I'll entertain a motion to refer this to town council.
Motion to refer to town council?
Okay, and we have a second.
Second.
All right.
Emil Dahlquist, aye.
Jonathan Poor, aye.
Bill Wheaton, aye.
Marnie Crouch, aye.
Corey Beaulieu, aye.
And Rick Mitchell, aye. Okay, so do you think you have enough information, Patrick, to formulate this question? Okay. So so this discussion will be continued. We will distribute the attorney's opinion regarding the formula for calculating the in lieu of payment to all parties, so we can determine if there's any other opinions or information that we haven't considered. And we will wait for the attorney's opinion on this. So the inclusionary housing discussion will be moved to November 9th.
Rick, I'm sorry, there is some Q&A on here. I don't know if
Okay,
that needs to be
jump.
addressed.
Yep,
Kind
go
of
ahead.
afraid to bring it up.
Can you read that? Oh, thank you.
Sure, yep. Kathy Rich Duvall, she's just contesting the previous subdivision plan from Toll Brothers. I don't know if that's relevant now.
Yeah.
It is actually, because it was a statement made.
Okay, so,
Go ahead. We don't know what the discussions were with Toll Brothers, and unless somebody on this board or in the audience was in the discussions with the Rich family and Toll Brothers, then anything that's opined is pure speculation. So, the next question?
this was the aesthetics question with regards to the entrance when we were speaking of that. Elizabeth apologizing.
I did not realize, oh, okay. That's fine, that's fine. No apologies needed. Sometimes we get a little off track and things get a little heated, so we appreciate the public's participation, and sometimes we just need to corral people in to focus on the topic at hand. Go ahead.
Christina Delalicio? As a member of the Manchester Planning Board, I wanted to take note for the record that I did not receive notice for the meeting. Additionally, my previous question was in anticipation of specific trees being noted in the presentation. The board voted without any quantification of trees, specifically on the Manchester Conservation Land. My initial question for asking the specific tree inventory. It's not addressed, and it was my understanding the purpose of the hearing. Question is, and still, how many trees will be removed? Only essential trees removed conservation land. Where is this discussion?
That was relative to the prior Scenic Road hearing.
Correct. Yeah. Sound is off. Cannot hear anything. Chris Davis. Hopefully can now hear. Tim.
Well, we already answered the question. We just shared the attorney's opinion. We just got the attorney's opinion, and it's been shared with the board and the public.
Right. And I think that's Tim just continuing.
Oh, I love that. Why is Rick Mitchell suppressing the town council's opinion from the rest of the planning board? Because he's an evil person.
For everybody's benefit there, it was under the advice of town council that this memorandum be confidential and not a public document until the board voted it to be so, just for clarity's sake.
Yeah. If it wasn't voted to make public, but they'll share it with the rest of the board members first. Yeah, it was voted to make it public.
Yep. Last one is, isn't it true that the previous decisions to violate the GPOD were incorrectly adopted by the board? It doesn't mean you continue to violate your own zoning laws for the sake of developers.
We were not talking about GPOD, so I have no idea where that question came from.
That's all the Q&A. Sorry.
Okay. Well, so it's 10:15. I know everybody's excited to continue. Board business.
Mr. Chair, can I ask you one question?
Sure.
So, as I had mentioned before, we have a great deal of material to present and extremely expensive subsequent hearings based on all of the criteria. And quite frankly, any misinterpretation of the bylaw to require only 44 units and then an attempt to get the formula based on what I heard from Robin Stein would completely dislodge our ability to move forward under the current plan. So before we do that, I would just want a sole meeting. So if you're going to continue to the 9th, that's fine. Then we're going to stop everything. We're not going to respond to people. We're going to wait to hear that opinion. Because that's critical, because I truly do not find any rational basis to go back on what the board did before. And for example, if you were to actually reduce to 44 units, you realize that now you eliminate one of the affordable units. That clearly makes, it's illogical.
Joe,
And I want to make sure you know that.
No,
If
I
you
get it.
actually did that, you reduce the amount of affordable units.
No, I get it. I get it. And I'm a board member that actually supports the interpretation of the two prior boards that I was on that made those determinations. But the board is going to has voted to get the town council's opinion on that. And I certainly.
And I do
no,
understand, I just meant if
let
it's
me
going to be
finish.
possible.
No, let me finish, Jill.
It's so
Jill.
substantial an issue that I can't find the justification, but it's the board's decision, and I recognize that, but I need the board to vote before I put in more time, because
No,
it
I
is
get it.
not.
I get it. Because it could potentially make this whole project uneconomical. And so so I understand your desire to put a halt to any future discussions or investment in this project. Then our timeline will be extended. So Patrick, I think on the next timeline for November 9th, which is the next time we can meet, is we'll have an opinion by town council on the inclusionary bylaw interpretation of units included
Number
or
of units, yes.
excluded.
Can do.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, all right. So, minutes.
Let's see, you have in your package October the 5th.
I apologize, we just didn't take a vote to continue to November 9th.
Oh, you're right. Thank you,
Thank you.
Jill.
I'm sorry again for the interruption.
No, it's 10:15 and I've lost my mind. Okay, so we needed a vote to continue the public hearing on 133 Essex Street, special permit until November 9th.
I so move.
Second.
All right, roll call vote. Corey?
Corey Beaulieu, aye.
Marnie Crouch, aye.
Bill Wheaton?
Bill Wheaton, aye.
Jonathan Poor, aye.
Emil Dahlquist, aye.
Or Rick Mitchell, aye. All right.
Thank you very much for your time. Good evening, and sorry it's so late. Take care.
Yeah, well, hey, it goes with the territory. All right, minutes. You were saying, Patrick?
We have in your package the October 5th minutes. We do not have the September 21st. We needed to do some more editing and additive work there, so we'll have that for the next meeting.
So, do we have minutes to vote on?
Yes.
Yes.
October 5th.
Okay.
And number 4 in your package is minutes from October the 5th.
Okay. Thank you. So this is draft number 3. So any comments, questions, concerns by the board?
I found just one minor issue, and it only occurred to me when we were voting on changing the Board of Selectmen to Select Board. So on the very last page, in board business, Select Board is all one word, when in actuality in the town warrant, it's 2 words. That's the
Yes,
only-
that was a discussion item with town council, how to parse that.
Right, so, but it doesn't change the,
No, it doesn't change any substance. It was only that.
right, because.
Today we learned it's 2 words, not 1.
Right.
And since you brought it up, just so everybody knows, if this gets voted by town meeting, it doesn't become law until the Attorney General approves it and has so notified us of that.
As is true for all bylaws.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll make, how about a motion to approve the minutes for October 5th? Well, we can
I'll
sit
make-
here all night until somebody does it.
I'll make the motion to approve the minutes of October 5.
Bill Wheaton, seconds.
All right, roll call. Emil?
Emil Dahlquist, aye.
Jonathan Poor, aye.
Bill Wheaton, aye.
Marnie Crouch, aye.
Corey Beaulieu, aye.
Rick Mitchell, aye. Okay, unless there's other board business, I'd love to adjourn. Patrick?
Just to make everybody aware, at the next meeting, we have some new and improved stormwater management regulations that reflect new changes to the state and federal requirements regarding stormwater management systems, et cetera. So we would need to have a public hearing within our next meeting. I will make sure that everybody's got plenty of paperwork in the meantime to read relative to preparing to vote on that. We'll have the engineer who's prepared them as well.
Okay, so that will fill the November 9th meeting.
Yep.
So it should be a fairly light meeting then. Anything else?
That's it.
Okay, motion to adjourn? Everybody wants to stay. Great.
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
Second.
I'm going to go for a unanimous voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Absolutely, yeah. Yes.
Unanimously,